can't say what this is. Okay. Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Imagine if I released that.
A lot of tea right here. That is not what I was expecting to see. I don't know if this is kosher to talk about on air, but I mean, we can start in a second if it's not. But you're building a bunker out there in Wyoming?
You know, the rule to Fight Club is you never talk about Fight Club. Right? So if you're building a bunker, you don't tell people because then everybody knows where to go when everything goes south. So, you know, it would be remiss of me to not say that. Yeah, I think people look. Being prepared is not a bad thing. Now, being paranoid, maybe.
A bunker feels a little paranoid, you know? Lou.
Well, look, there's an old saying, right? Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you.
What is a bunker? Wait, I mean, we hear all about these billionaire bunkers. Last I checked, though, the Pentagon doesn't pay billionaire contracts to its employees.
No, it does not.
So what does your bunker look like? Like, allegedly?
Allegedly. So here, how about this? Let's say in general terms, if you want a bunker. And by the way, it's not just for, you know, end of the world situations. It could be for things environmental, like even tornadoes, right? We have a lot of tornadoes out in Wyoming. So, people who live in Florida will say, yeah, we have these hurricanes, winds get to 110, you know, category 1, category 2 storm, maybe once every 10, 15 years in Florida. This is like almost every other week in where I live in Wyoming. We have winds. It's not uncommon to have a 90-mile-an-hour wind or a 100-mile-an-hour gust of wind. So homes have to be built a certain way. They just will not survive the environment. So if you have, for example, a tornado rolling through, you know, maybe you want to use the bunker for that, just in case, right? So a lot of people out there in Wyoming are there for several reasons. A lot of people just want to disappear. And out in Wyoming, we're a constitutional state, so you can build whatever you want on your property. And so, yeah, people build bunkers, and typically what you want in there is enough rations and food and water, right, that can sustain you for a prolonged period of time. Now, how long that is depends on the size of your bunker and whatnot. You also need ventilation. You know, people think, oh, I'm just going to seal myself underground. Well, you just built a coffin. Congratulations. You know, it's not going to do you very much good. You also want medicine, and you also, when I say medicine, everything from antibiotics to how to do field expedient surgery, you know, pain medication if you need it, everything you would need to sustain yourself if you didn't have any type of medical resource or communications or food or any other type of logistics, you have to be able to survive by yourself. And now, if you go back 100 years, you know, in human history, most people knew how to do that automatically. They were, you know, scratching out a living on the land and whatnot if they were living in a rural community, and it's not a big deal. But nowadays, a lot of people have forgot, you know, what it takes to survive a situation.
They're too busy tweeting.
Yeah, and other things, you know, and I think some of these skill sets have been lost. You know, how do you tie a tourniquet? When do you tie a tourniquet, right? How, under what circumstances? Look, we've got snakes out there. You know, it's people can get bit by rattlesnakes. What do you do, right? Let's say it's 11 o'clock at night. You're walking out to your horse stable barn and you get bit. You know, well, a hospital might be 40, 50 miles away. Down
40, 50 miles away?
Yeah, I mean, not in my case, but in some cases, yeah. I mean, people live off the grid way out there. So what are you going to do? You know, and if there's a snowstorm, ambulance can't get there. So
do they even have cops out there?
We do. Actually, you know what? I got to tell you, Julian, I got a buddy of mine. He was a cop in Baltimore when I was still fed. And long story short, we went out to Wyoming a few years later, and he was there. We met him there, and he retired immediately after coming out to Wyoming, and is now the chief of police in my small hometown. Super guy. And you know, this is
Baltimore to Wyoming.
Yeah. I mean, right. Talk about a change, right?
Yeah.
You know, some may argue that it's, you know, maybe not as exciting, but you've probably extended your lifespan a little bit.
Yeah, I guess you go from like street drug stops to like potential, I don't know, oligarch families building bunkers under the ground. Not you, but you know, other people doing crazy out there in the wilderness.
Look, they call it God's country for a reason. It is really amazing. I mean, you have Yellowstone, you have Devil's Tower out there, you've got the Crow Nation out there, you've got these beautiful, beautiful mountain ranges that are just stunning. Everything you would have, like for example, if you're a skier, we've got ski resorts pretty much in all the mountain towns. Right?
Oh yeah,
and it's cheap. It's not expensive. And it's a constitutional state, and our crime rate's low, and people are actually friendly there. People will say, "Well, Wyoming it's not very diverse, is it? How do you feel as a Cuban?" I'm like, "Look, guys, we are the state literally of black cowboys and white rappers, so we are extremely diverse." It's I think people have a misnomer about what Wyoming is about. It's a wonderful, wonderful place. I will never leave that place. Yes, I might wind up traveling a lot, but
never.
Brother, it's incredible. Come on out. You'll see it.
I will, but I'm just saying, you say never like you're not angling for a little DCer job in the new administration. I'm just saying, I don't know if you're building a bunker in DC. It's got to be a little harder there, more regulations.
Well, we call that the Pentagon, actually. It's a great place to be. If you guys ever want to come out, it really is. Sometimes people come out and visit me, it hasn't been only one time someone has actually bought property after visiting us.
I've heard people go out there and they fall in love and they don't want to leave. I've heard that story. Wyoming, Montana, all these different places, and I've never been, but you just see the pictures and how grand and beautiful it is, especially in like the post-COVID era and everything, where people are like, "Let me." The city. It's
not uncommon to go through a drive-through and see two people on a horseback going through the drive-through.
Wow.
And ordering, that's right.
Some next level right there.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, wow, we are not in Kansas anymore, right? No pun intended.
Yeah. And you got a bar downstairs too, you're showing us.
I do. Those winters get cold, right? So, you need something to keep you warm at night. I made the mistake a long time ago I had every crap job you can imagine growing up as a kid. So every job that nobody wanted to do, I did. So whether it's construction and roofing and HVAC and bouncer and, whatever, every crap job you could have, I had it. And so I made the mistake when I first met my wife, letting her know that, it was a little handy. I could do plumbing and electrical. And so now anytime anything needs to be done, I get stuck doing it. And so
that's how it goes.
Yeah. So my wife was like, I'd love an Irish bar down here in the basement.
Oh, it was your wife's idea.
Yeah. So I was like, yeah, that would be great. She's
Jen partying up in here.
You know what? She, it really turned out really nice and turned out really bougie. And some friends of ours took the idea and decided to create an English pub in their entire basement. So I have like one room that's a bar. My buddy of mine he actually runs security for me, actually turned the entire half of his basement into he's got like a dart alley. He's got these secret door, like a speakeasy. It is the coolest thing. It's awesome. All done in English Tudor style. And he did it himself, right? So that's the one thing about Wyoming. If you want to get work done out there, unless you live in Jackson, you might have to wait a while to get, some talent to come in to do specialized work. So you're kind of stuck doing it yourself. I built an Irish pub in our basement.
Yeah, we're going to have to check that out at some point. Yeah. But I don't want to get off the buried lead here about the move back east to D.C. What is happening? We got a new administration in here. Yeah. Apparently, allegedly, they're taking the whole threat in our skies thing a little more seriously than, say, some past administrations, including, I guess, the past one that Trump had. Yeah. So what's going on? I know you don't want to reveal all the behind-the-scenes things because I know there's some professional aspects of that. But, are you getting a role here? What are we doing?
Look, first of all, if my country asks me to serve, again, I will. Those decisions aren't mine to make. Are there people out there that might be more qualified than me to assume certain roles? I hope so. Yeah, I'll go work for them. I have no problem doing that. There are people in this new administration that are much, much more proactive on this topic of UAP and air domain awareness. If there's one thing I've been trying to tell people for the last 7 years, UAP aside, we have no clue what's in our skies. Mm-hmm. We don't. And we just saw a horrible, horrible tragedy, 2 of them. One possibly because we did not have complete air domain awareness. You had a helicopter crashing with a little regional jet, and we lost a lot of lives because of it. Right, so that's problematic. We simply do not know everything that's in our skies, whether it's drones and Chinese balloons or UAP or even helicopters. So we need to do something. If you look at what Tulsi Gabbard, who is now being considered for the position of the Director of National Intelligence, which, by the way, she has my full vote of confidence. She's incredibly smart, also a veteran and served her nation honorably. And then, of course, was a representative in Congress, right? So very, very, very achieved woman. And she's now being considered for the Director of National Intelligence. She said that one of the very first things she's going to do as the DNI is look into these drone and UAP issues. Now, this is potentially a cabinet level position that she is now saying, for the record, these are going to be some of our priorities. You also have RFK Jr. that's had a long history in this topic and wants increased transparency. He
has a long history in this topic? I'm less aware of that.
Yeah.
What's the story there?
You know, you'd have to ask him. You know, I tend to.
We'll get him in here right after you.
Yeah. You also have people like Marco Rubio, who was on the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence, a sissy who's now Secretary of State, right? Who's going to be, and then you've got other individuals, Ratcliffe, who is now the Director of CIA, who's already said for the record that it looks like UAP, whatever they are real. We got to figure these things out. So you've got folks like Don Jr. Who have been really, really championing the idea of transparency for the American people. Now, I want to say something here because people are going to say, "Oh, lose a Trump lover." Look, I love anybody who's willing to make a difference, a positive difference for this nation. I don't give a damn if you're Democrat or Republican or anything in between. What I care about is can you walk the walk when the time comes? Are you willing to do what's necessary? And I think we're seeing that. We're seeing a lot of changes here. So again, politics aside, because people will sit there and accuse me of all sorts of things. Either they think, "Oh, he's a
always will."
Oh yeah, dude, it's crazy. The bottom line is the proof is in the pudding. Can you make the changes that you said you're going to make? And we're beginning to see some of those changes. Now, are there other candidates on the Democratic side who've done the same? Yeah, of course. There were some great presidents as well.
Buffalo! Everyone's favorite slot game is live on DraftKings Casino. Hit the reels wherever and whenever to play for Wild Western wins. New players can play for $5 to get a spin on the mystery wheel for a shot at up to $2,000 in casino credits. Download the DraftKings app and sign up with code Julian, Julian. Join the Stampede with Buffalo on DraftKings Casino now. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly, 21 plus, physically present in Connecticut, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, West Virginia only. Void in Ontario. Eligibility restrictions apply. One per new customer. Play $5 and spin wheel to receive between $10 and $2,000 in non-withdrawable casino credits for select games that expire in 168 hours. Terms at casino.draftkings.com/promos. Ends February 16th, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time.
So, we've got to stop being so myopic and say, well, this administration or that administration. Look, all administrations have their advantages and all have their challenges, right? It's up to us as the American people to let the administration know what our priorities are. Yeah. And also Congress, right? If you don't like the person, there's an old saying that bad politicians are voted in by good people who don't vote, right? If you don't like it, then look in the mirror. I don't know what to tell you. Say, well, I didn't like it, so I didn't vote. Well, okay, there's the result, right? So I'm extremely optimistic about this new administration. They seem very proactive, very serious about transparency and getting to the bottom of this. Again, politics aside, if you follow the UAP topic, you'll see that I think we are postured like we have never been before for true transparency with the American people.
So with Tulsi, though, to go back to that one. So she's nominated. We're recording this on Sunday. This is going to come out on Friday, I believe. So I don't think she's confirmed yet.
She's not confirmed yet.
Right, but that would have apparently happened this week. But she, as DNI, for people out there who are less familiar with, I guess, the organizational structure of government, can you just explain the full scope of that? Obviously, she has full oversight of all intelligence agencies, but how much does that mean that they can read her into everything versus keep things hidden within each agency?
Well, theory and reality are two different things.
Okay.
In theory, she should be a super user, be read onto everything, both Title 15, Title 10 programs, so covert action, clandestine, and everything in between. The reality is that doesn't always occur. And so that's a problem. That's a dysfunction of the system. Now, if you want to, for people who don't understand what the DNI is, everybody knows who the director of the CIA, right, what they do. But the DNI position is kind of a new position. And it really It didn't start until probably the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004, I believe, that established the position of a DNI. So why do we need a DNI? What does it do? And so you need to really look back like 80 years in American history to understand how this all precipitated. After World War II, right on the heels of World War II, Congress realized that after looking at the lessons learned of World War II, that there was some dysfunction in our national security. So they created the National Security Act of 1947 that really established your Secretary of War, which now we call a Secretary of Defense, and basically says, okay, whereas before during World War II, maybe the person who's running the Navy operations in the Pacific isn't really coordinating with Army guy who's running the ground operations in the Philippines, right? So there's a disconnect there. We need kind of a daddy bear or a mommy bear to honcho and coordinate all these efforts. And over time, you had the services, Army and Navy, and you had Air Force. Later on, becoming from Army Air Corps to Air Force, and it started to work. We started realizing, okay, now we're becoming more functional as a government, military, and national security apparatus. So what happens 50 some years later? 9/11. And all of a sudden, we realized, crap, we had a huge intelligence failure. CIA and FBI both had pieces of information, and Department of Defense also had information, but they weren't sharing it. And as a result, 9/11 happened. And it was part of the 9/11 Commission reports that Congress had commissioned to say, what failed? How did this happen? So they realized we need to do the same thing with the intelligence community as we did with the Department of Defense and our national security apparatus. And we're going to create a daddy bear or a mommy bear, if you will, a head honcho for intelligence. And so we create this position called the Director of National Intelligence that is basically going to be the ringleader of all these 17 organizations in the intelligence community. People don't know. There's a lot of organizations out there that do intelligence. It's not just the military, and it's not just the CIA. It's not just the FBI. Right?
Who else?
Yeah, these organizations, NGA, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, right? NSA, National Security Agency, all these organizations that have their own intelligence mission. And so you need somebody that can coordinate all these on behalf of the nation and then report directly to the president. So this is the position that Tulsi Gabbard has gone through these hoops to be considered and Senate confirmed. It's not easy. I mean, you are responsible. If anything goes wrong, you're responsible, right? So you need the best and brightest. And so that's why you have this creation of the DNI. And in theory, she should be read onto everything. The reality is, operationally speaking, there's not enough time in the day. There's so many programs that are out there. It's like, look, I'm going to hire people, managers, like, for example, we call them National Intelligence Managers, NIMS. So you have different, if you will, bubbas and bubettes that work for the DNI, managing certain functional areas like NIM aviation or maritime domain awareness, and the National Intelligence Manager for, fill in the blank, China or whatever you want. And they, in theory, should be read onto everything as well within their portfolios and then bring that information up to the DNI. So then that he or she can then inform the president. And so that's really, I know it's a long-winded way to explain what is the DNI, but if you really want to answer, you really need to start 70 years ago to have that conversation with people and say, oh, now I see why we have a DNI.
What makes you like Tulsi for that position so much?
Oh, my gosh. Well, look, I'm always, you've probably realized by now, I'm not a kiss and tell kind of guy. I don't like explaining to people, who I know, who I've talked to. So let's just look at it at face value. She's a veteran. She has been on both sides, both Democrat and Republican, right? And people criticize her for that. I think it's great. Look, when facts change, what happens? I change my mind, right? And that's okay. You're not stuck and wedded to a particular allegiance of a political party just because you feel obligated. Look, if we're human beings, and if situations changes, and a lot of people are also politically fluid. They're kind of this in the moderate middle, right? And maybe they're socially liberal but fiscally conservative and whatnot. So, I think it's dangerous to pigeonhole people. And Tulsi's been one of those people who've told people, look, I don't agree with certain politics and policies, and I think from a national security perspective, we need to do this. She's been there and done that. She's highly decorated military officer, lieutenant colonel, right? So she's no dummy. And by the way, in a system, an ecosystem, military system, that really has not been very good to females. That's fact. It's true. Look, and they can tell you, oh, we're all equal now and all. That's horse crap. It's not. Women are still not given the same, even though we like to think they are, they're not given the same advantages and opportunities that their male counterparts are.
In the military.
In the military, unfortunately. And there's a lot of sexual harassment. So if you want to survive the military, you really got to be a hardcore sister to do it. I mean, you got to have your shit straight. And then on top of that, she entered the world of politics and became a congresswoman, right? And then after that, still becomes an advocate trying to help her country. Long before she was ever considered for a position of D&I, she was still trying to make a difference. So I try to look at someone's heart as much as I can. People say, she's a Russian sympathizer. First of all, you don't know that. You're getting that crap from some sort of mainstream media outlet that's an echo chamber giving you the information that you want to hear. So before you jump to conclusions, I always recommend know the person you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And break bread with them. Look them in the eye. And then if you have that same opinion, great. But give them an opportunity. Don't just, I read an article that says someone is someone and they're doing this with Russia. Well, there's also a lot of misinformation out there. And ask me how I know, because I face it all the time. So, my recommendation to people is give somebody a break, give them the benefit of the doubt, listen to their words and their actions and see where that takes you. And if at the end of the day you still feel that way, then okay, but at least you've done your due diligence. And that's all I'm asking. So I think Tulsi has got tremendous potential. I've always been an advocate to see her go where she wants to go.
How long have you known her?
Well, you know what? That's a question you probably need to ask her. I don't even to say no, right? How long have I known of her, or how long have I?
I see what you're saying.
I don't want to.
You don't want to call someone a friend if you've talked with them a few times.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Because my definition of friend may be a different definition than you have, right?
Yes.
There's
a lot of people who throw around names and act like they went to fucking college with them.
Yeah, right. No, I did not go to college with Tulsi or RFK or any of these folks. But I have seen enough from the periphery to have my own opinion.
Sure.
And I think she is a very qualified candidate. And again, I know people are going to be all pissed off at me and I'm not following you anymore, Lou. Look. I don't know what to tell you. Have you been in the military? You might have a different appreciation for what she's had to endure. I think. So, anyways, that's how I answer that question.
Yeah. So it's interesting to hear you breaking it down because you come from deep in the Pentagon. You come from what some people would look at on the internet and say, "Oh, is Lou a part of the deep state or whatever?"
Yeah, right.
And Tulsi, you took the words out of my mouth. They were throwing around this Russian asset thing with her starting back when she ran in 2020, which to me, I'd never heard any evidence on that. It seemed totally ridiculous. But that was this tag that got put on her by, I don't know, the mainstream media, Hillary Clinton, or political opponents.
Dude, it's a form of political cancellation,
yes,
right? It's just like we have right now with the wokeness in our nation, which I do believe we should have fair opportunity for everybody, but I don't believe in special privilege. And there's people that have been trying to do the same thing by canceling individuals, but do it politically, right? I call that administrative terrorism.
Administrative terrorism.
By writing little notes or little things or thing. Like, for example, someone tried to have my security clearance revoked some time ago, actually. Oh, yeah, I was under investigation. And I wound up winning because it was completely BS.
How do you win that? I thought they could just do, the president could just do that.
The president can, but what happens is that, for example, there'll be an anonymous complaint sent through IG, DOD or CIA or the intelligence community saying, I saw Lou, I don't know, wear a pink tutu and combat boots and run around his house, singing a cappella. And, just as an example.
Quite a visual.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, yikes. And then all of a sudden that anonymous complaint goes up. They look and say, is he mentally able to have and psychologically able to have a security clearance? Let's see here. And then they'll go ahead and they'll suspend your clearance. Then it's up to the person, based upon a completely erroneous accusation, to have to defend themselves. And that's hard because now you're defending yourself from a position where you're already kind of being accused as being guilty, right? It's not innocent until proven guilty.
And this is after government service?
Even after, yeah, if you have a security clearance, yeah. And so I had to come back and basically read them the riot act, say, look, guys, don't tell me about the law. I know what the law says. And here, boom, 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 boom. And I help write some of the policies for security clearances. And because of this section and this section and this section.
You help write some of the policy?
Yeah, long time. It's not uncommon. Look, policy is
It's not uncommon. That sounds like some.
It's really not. We call them policy wonks or policy folks. It's really not a glamorous job. You promote yourself to the point you get promoted out of the field to the point where now you're what they call flying a desk, right? You get behind it. You're handling budgets now, and
you're in your cigar era.
Yeah, you trade in your 9mm for a pen.
That's right.
And that's what you do. So. Writing policy is something that's very important. I had spent, I guess, a good portion of my life trying to figure out ways around policy. So they finally gave me and said, "Okay, you know where all the loopholes are, Lou. You're going to fix them, right?" So I was in several of my positions. I was the director of policy. So we wrote policy and drafted policy, coordinated policy on behalf of the department, the intelligence community, and security clearance is one of those.
Wow!
You know, among many other policies, like for example, polygraph examinations or policies on how we conduct counterintelligence under these circumstances, right? And so every government organization uses policy for very specific reasons. People don't understand how the American government actually works.
Yeah.
And policy is really, if you look at, and this is actually kind of interesting. I don't want to bore anybody in your audience, but
you're not boring me at all. So keep going.
Okay, so let's take, for example, a law that Congress decides to pass. Congress says, we are going to pass a law that says X, Y, Z, and here is an act, a congressional act, right? Like I said, National Security Act of 1947 or the CI Enhancement Act of 2002 or the IRTPA of 2004, right? There's these acts that are passed by Congress. Then it's up to the executive branch to pass directives because remember, Congress's function is to make laws. It's executive branch's responsibility to enforce laws. So to enforce those laws, you have things like executive orders, like Executive Order EO 12333 on United States intelligence activities. You have all these orders, maybe a national security directive, an NSD that comes out. Then you have DOD will put out their DOD directive based upon an executive order. The CIA will put out what they used to call DSKIDs. They're all DCI directives. For kind of enforcing that executive order until eventually you get all the way down to the subordinate levels of like, for example, the Army, where the Army will say, well, okay, here's DOD Directive 5240.1. We're going to come up with our Army regulation 3D112, 3D110, right, on how we, the Army, conducts intelligence activities. And then you have all the way down to the unit level where they can't really write policy, but they can write what? SOPs, standing operating procedures. Yeah. So all those things start cascading down as a result of Congress passing a law. And people don't understand that policies are there to basically, how does my organization, my office, implement Congress's law and the president's desire. And that's why all these policies and rules and regulations are important, because that's how government works. You have to codify it in writing for it to be real. Otherwise, it's just hearsay. So there's a whole process to do that. And if you write the wrong policy, you can find yourself in a really bad situation, because policy is basically the decree on how we're going to do something as an organization. And if you have bad policy, then you can make bad decisions.
Sure. Now, what does that look like, though, to go back to people trying to revoke your security clearance? And you said, like, you have to come in and defend yourself without revealing exact people or groups.
I need an attorney. I had Danny Sheehan.
Really?
He had to, absolutely.
The old Sheehan went in there for you.
He did. And he read them the riot act. He tore them up and down. He's like, bring it on. And, magically about a month later, oh, Lou, sorry, guess what? Everything's okay. Everything's fine. You still have your TS security clearance and whatnot.
Basically, the Jesuit Illuminati went in there and took care of business.
Yes. And it was a result of the admin terrorism that I was enduring, and others, by the way, like me as well, who've come forward, decide to quote unquote blow the whistle, have also had these type of things done to them. And so I knew that if I didn't make a stand to it, then they would steamroll me and other people, and they would make an example out of me, and other people then wouldn't want to come out and talk. So we fought it, and we succeeded.
What do you think the motives of the people who were trying to get that to happen? What do you think those motives
were?
I
know what they were. In fact, there was a comprehensive newspaper article on an individual. My mother used to say, "I have nothing kind to say, don't say it at all." But anybody can look it up. There was an article done, I believe, by the Debrief, and it was called "Sex, Lies, and UFOs." And in there is a very comprehensive story about how the government, particularly the Department of Defense, tried to conduct retribution on me. Yeah, that's it.
As the Pentagon's Director for Defense Intelligence and a senior executive, let's X that out, senior executive in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, OUSD, Gary Reid was in charge of all counterintelligence, security, and law enforcement operations within the Department of Defense. This in addition to heading the Afghanistan Crisis Action Group, the office tasked with evacuating Afghan refugees during America's withdrawal from Afghanistan. Let's go down. Now, in an exclusive, The Debrief has learned that Reid was recently dismissed from his responsibilities within the U.S. government before his ousting as Director of Defense Intelligence, so he was high up. Reid had been the subject of a nearly 2-year-long investigation by The Debrief, speaking on the condition of anonymity. Multiple current and former Pentagon employees told The Debrief Reid had engaged in wide-ranging misconduct and corruption for years. In the past 4 years, the DoD's Inspector General's office had investigated Reid on numerous allegations, including maintaining a sexual relationship with a subordinate employee, sexual harassment, and fostering a hostile work environment. Actually, I see your name coming up right here. So in 2020, the IG office found that Reid had violated joint ethics regulations by creating an appearance of an inappropriate relationship or preferential treatment with a female subordinate and mishandling of controlled unclassified information. I hope she was hot, dude. Hope it was worth it. In May 2021, Reid was named in yet another former IG complaint, this time involving former Director of National Program Special Management Staff at OUSD, Luis Elizondo. All right, I got you. So this is the guy in the middle of some things that for whatever... You want me to keep going?
No. That's just so you know. It's really about my involvement in AATIP. And so this is what caused this IG complaint. And also a lot of my headaches. This was the pivotal time when the Pentagon went from saying, yeah, AATIP was real, Lou ran it, to all of a sudden this guy got butthurt. And so they started changing their tune before this article came out, where they're like, oh, AATIP wasn't real and Lou had nothing to do with it, right? Well, even though we had all the receipts, we had the goods, we knew it. And so did Congress and so did everybody else. But it started there where they started lying about me.
Gotcha.
And they changed the narrative. They tried to change the narrative. And they also tried to launch an investigation against my security clearance, which fortunately I won.
Guys, it's that time of year again. We're 1 month into New Year's resolutions, which statistically is usually the time people have already given up on them. I know I've done that in the past. I'm sure you can relate. But today we're going to talk about a product that I've talked about before and that I've used for about 5 years now that will help you automatically keep a New Year's resolution. Let me explain that by first introducing today's sponsor, our friends over at Acorns. Acorns is a unique investment platform that allows you to invest either your spare change or whatever predetermined amount you want every day. You set it and it's going to do it for you automatically. So if one of your New Year's resolutions was to save and invest some more money, this is the app for you. I started using Acorns back in March 2020 at the very beginning of the pandemic. I really didn't have much of anything, but that money that I put in was given the opportunity to grow, and it helped me buy some of the very equipment you see in this studio today. So this stuff can really go a long way. Acorns makes it easy to automatically start saving and investing so that your money has a chance to grow for you, your kids, and your retirement. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that fits you and your money goals. And like I just mentioned myself with my own personal experience with Acorns, you don't need to be rich to use it. Acorns lets you invest with the spare money you've got right now. It could be $5 or even just your spare change. So head on over to acorns.com/Julian or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. The link to that is down in the description below. Once again, that's acorns.com/Julian or download the Acorns app today.
This is a paid client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, and SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/Julian.
Well, let's clear that up right now because this makes sense. So basically people who were enemies, like maybe this guy within the Pentagon, had some reason or motive to say that, you know, we want Lou out of our way because they want to do something else. And over the years, one of the things that's been used where people will take a lot of your words and try to overlap them or twist them apart is when it comes to the AWSAP ATIP thing. So let's clear that up right now. You, the way I understand it, you were brought into the program called ATIP at the ending days of what was AWSAP. So you were not necessarily a part of AWSAP.
Yeah,
is that fair to say?
Think of AWSAP as a big umbrella, right? And then think of AWSAP as New Jersey and think of, I don't know, Hoboken as being ATIP. It's a smaller umbrella under a much bigger umbrella. AWSAP was investigating a lot of stuff. They had the ranch, Skinwalker Ranch, that people know about, and some other stuff they were doing. Not my place to really discuss because that wasn't really involved in the AWSAP piece. Then you had this little umbrella called ATIP, which was really, for my focus, nuts and bolts. You know, these are men and women in uniform flying aircraft that are coming up close and personal to these UAP. Sometimes we have to worry about, air flight safety issues. That was my focus. And so AATIP, and then when AWSAP ran out in 2012, the contract, AATIP continued. And
what does that mean it ran out?
So there was a 5-year contract period. If you look at the original AWSAP contract, it was for 5 years. So 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. When that funding ran out, they needed more funding or the program went away. In this particular case, the program kind of went away, and what remained was AATIP, which we continued to run at the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And I ran that with my colleagues and I till about 2017, approximately late 2017. And so that's kind of the history of AATIP. But there's been many articles since that have then uncovered a lot of stuff that have actually shown some malfeasance by some of my enemies. Well, for example, my work, I had 2 jobs. The last several years, I was part of AATIP, and I was also running, covert action. So I was running some very sensitive operations for the White House and the National Security Council. And there was some discussion there while we were doing what we were doing that I'm trying to say how to keep myself from getting in trouble.
Take your time.
Yeah. There was some concerns there that we had inside the department that there might have been some people that were not friendly to what we were doing, even though we were asked to do it. And we had money and funding to do it. So in 2014 and 2013, after AWSAP funding died, we requested another $10 million from then Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid.
Yes.
And it was approved. The problem is that the way that it was written for that funding, because we didn't want to say UAP and UFOs, we said ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance of some sort of extreme futuristic, potentially technology that conduct ISR on us, right?
DARPA.
Right. And so what wound up happening is that the ISR task force, which was actually being run by a colleague of mine, assumed that money was for them. And so they took it.
Oh.
Yeah.
They can just do that. Just take the money.
Well, when they outrank you, absolutely. So we were outvoted. And so I had to go back and have the conversation, very uncomfortable conversation with that person and say, look, that money was intended for us. And they're like, well, too late. We took the money and we spent it on a bunch of academic studies and doing this and doing that.
And then you take a gun out and hold it to their head and say, you're going to give it back, right?
Yeah, well, not exactly. But it was a very frustrating time for us. So that's, people say, well, you weren't funded. Yeah, we were. And actually I had other dual funding as well sources. That's how I paid people, right? Yeah. We had a lot of people on AATIP and contractors that were doing work for us, and we had academic studies done. But the problem is the government has been fully honest about it. And then you have the issue where in my job running some sensitive missions, there is a court order by the Office of Military Commissions, OMC, the Department of Defense, who's now handling the 9/11, the 9/11-5, right? The Fab Five, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi Ben Oshie, Ben Atash, all those knuckleheads. There is a court order, preservation order, in place that said if you work any aspects of Guantanamo Bay, your emails are and everything correspondence you write has to be preserved forever, because it's considered evidence in a 9/11 trial, a military commission's trial. There were actually 2 of those orders that were put out. So the department knew that all my files needed to be maintained and retained, and they didn't. What happened is, they said they didn't. So what happened is about a year later, there was a FOIA request through the Pentagon.
What year are we in now?
2019, maybe 20. And the Pentagon said, oh, we deleted all loose files. Within a year, everything.
And you had an official role at Guantanamo.
Yes.
There was a nice little nickname for that role too. Just saying.
Yeah, I'm sure if anybody had to listen to my audiobook, they'd probably agree with that. But it's very frustrating. So the government said no, the Pentagon said no, we don't have any of his files. They're all gone. They're deleted. Knowing that that's where they're going to find everything, right? Showing that AATIP was real and everything else. And then it wasn't for another couple of years later when someone said, well, I've got this email in my hand dated 2017, and it's an email between Lou and another guy talking about the transfer of ATIP authorities and responsibilities. What do you say to that?
Who was the other guy? Or are you not allowed to say that?
It's out. If you do enough digging, you'll see exactly the email correspondence. And all of a sudden, the Pentagon said, oh, yeah, that email. You know what? We did find one, and they submitted it. But when they submitted it, they redacted the name ATIP. So everything where I'm talking about ATIP and about the transfer of authorities from me to another individual, they redacted because they knew it went against their narrative where they told people, no, ATIP wasn't real. Well, here's an email that's saying it was real, right? And by the way, another senior official in the Department of Defense assuming responsibility. And oh, by the way, there's this conversation between none other than the Secretary of Defense's direct staff and Lou Elizondo and this other guy saying yes, right? So it was pretty, it was kind of a cathartic moment for me.
Yeah.
And then, you know,
how does no one go down for deleting all those emails though, by the way? I mean, that's a separate issue, but that's like a big deal.
Exactly my point. You're lying to the American people. And this is what drives me.
That's breaking the law.
Damn right it is. You want to know what drives Lou Elizondo? It's that. That is an abuse of power. Someone making a decision and breaking the law because they simply don't want to get caught. So that is, you know, to guys like me who actually took an oath to defend this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic, when it turns out that the enemy is a bureaucracy and some middle-level manager that's trying to lie to the American people, you know, look out. Because I'm going to be all over you. I'm not quitting. And what you see is now, you know, what happened.
Sounds like this is the kind of thing that unfortunately happens far too often and nothing happens.
It does. And if somebody didn't understand the system like I did, they would have been steamrolled. If somebody didn't have the legal protection that I did, they would have been steamrolled. If someone didn't have the savvy and the friends inside the government that I had, they would have been steamrolled.
Yeah.
And that's crap. You know, you have people that are trying to do their patriotic duty. And what are you doing? You're lying about them. You're trying to destroy their credibility. You know, exactly the same thing that people are accusing the government of doing, and you're actually doing it in front of everybody for everybody to see, and you're doing it unapologetically. You know, So anyways, that's kind of a long-winded answer of
it's
destroyed stuff.
It's important for context because unfortunately a lot of it then wraps into your story. As we see, there's obviously some attacks that come against you. We know that online it's like there's Team Lou and Team Anti-Lou and all that, and you know a lot of it is
I hate teams, man. I wish we were just all one team. Man.
It's very stupid. But you are, I'll say this off camera as well. Whenever any names come up, and I won't say any of them at the moment, but whenever any names that were anywhere near ATIP or have talked about it before or would be in the know in the government in some way surrounding these programs, like at least with me, you've always just been nothing but complimentary of people, never said a bad word about anybody.
No.
And yet there seems to be, and I hate that this happens, but we got to address it just because unfortunately this topic exists online. There seems to be a fuck ton of like high school drama that happens among some of these people where on the one hand, some of you will be like friends. And then on the other hand, some of those people will then just throw shit into the fire.
Undermine.
And now I am going to give a name example. There's some hilarious shit, like literally, you can't make this up, about like Discord messages involving Jay Stratton's wife because he's got like a book coming out. And Jay is a guy that you've worked with in the past. You've been complimentary of him off air with me before.
Highly intelligent.
But it seems like there's now like this little high school fucking lunch fight or middle school lunch fight that's going on where someone's trying to say, no, I did that and he didn't do this. And they're trying to sell books out of it. Now, you obviously wrote a book as well, so let's be fair there. But what do you think that is? Because to me, part of it could look like it's almost a distraction. Like this is a part of some, you know, not to paint you as like some deep state guy or whatever, but this could be your giant stage that y'all are playing and laughing, and we got to sit here and watch and argue about it in Twitter Spaces.
Well, I'll tell you that my book was reviewed by several people inside ATIP before it was published. It was also, a lot of people were interviewed directly for it. So it was their accounts that are in the book. And I don't want to look, I'm not here to plug a book, right? I feel slimy doing. That's not my motivation for being here, but you brought it up. So I'm not really worried about that. And as far as the childhood drama, you know, it's like a middle, not even high school, middle school, you know, lunchroom. I try not to be distracted by that. There's a lot of really good people out there. You know, I don't know what motivates people. I'm not a trained psychologist. I hope for whoever out there has some sort of bad feelings towards me, I hope they find their peace, however they have to do that. If it takes me, putting my arm on their shoulder and being like, hey, it's okay. We're one team, one fight. I don't know. I mean, maybe you know better than I do, right? I mean, let's look at it. The social media world we live in today, the advantage is you allow everyone to have a voice. But when you allow everybody to have a voice, that means anybody has a voice, right? And some of those people are motivated by personal agendas. And,
no.
Yeah, say it
I can't believe that.
Yeah. So I try my best to not engage in that type of non-constructive conversation. Like I said before, my mother used to say, if I have nothing nice to say about somebody, don't say it at all.
But with people you work with, can't you call up like a Jay and be like, what the fuck, bro? Like off air, not on a camera or anything. Like, isn't there like a human element to this too?
I think it's unfair just to call one person out. It's
there's other people.
And it's human dynamics, right? There's things that you and I can agree on 99% of the time, but then there's one hot button issue where maybe we don't, right? And maybe people's emotions and whatnot get the best of them. I don't know. Jay's a very honorable man. He has done great things for his nation. Very good things for his nation. I personally witnessed his work ethic. He was very, very good both in AATIP and AWSAP.
What was his role?
In which specifically? Remember, he became the UAP Task Force Director. So after AATIP, he fleeted up and became the UAP Task Force Director, which, by the way, did some really good stuff. I mean, really, really good stuff that hopefully he'll talk about in his book. But
within AATIP, what was he doing?
He was one of the founders of AWSAP, believe it or not, him and Lakatsky. Him and Lakatsky and a few others. And
Lakatsky's the guy that brought you in, right?
Yes. Well, actually, it was, believe it or not, it was Jay and another person, and Lakatsky was the director at the time of AWSAP.
Okay.
So Jay was he was one of the guys who actually built AWSAP. So he deserves a tremendous amount of credit for that. Folks like Bigelow and folks like Eric Davis, Hal Puthoff. I mean, just absolute giants in our world. I don't know. I mean, bring some in here and ask them. I don't know. I can't answer for them. I can tell you folks like Chris Mellon also did a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes. People don't realize how much credit he deserves. There's other individuals, the pilots, multiple pilots, many that we discussed and had conversations with, eyewitnesses and radar operators. So as far as the middle school drama, man, I don't get involved. It's not helpful. And all it does is create a distraction. You don't want your president and vice president, getting in a dumb tit for tat. It's not productive.
I think it's totally unproductive because I think we should all be interested in the same type of answers here, which is what the fuck is going on and what can the government say about it and what do we deserve as like a human right to know.
Well, that's what it is, right? I mean, look, bottom line is we're part of a program that discovered some pretty interesting stuff, and we think the American people have a right to know. Yeah. That's the issue. All this other stuff is people trying to create drama and distractions and clicks and likes and, I'm going to go ahead and create artificial drama, so therefore people will click on mine. And, here's the irony. Here's the irony, Julian. They accuse someone of being a grifter, and yet they're actually grifting on accusing someone else of being a grifter, meaning if I call you a grifter and I start writing posts that you're a grifter, and now people are clicking and liking mine, and now I'm getting advertisement revenue for it, I'm the one actually grifting, right, off of you by accusing you as being a grifter. And that's the irony here. Those that are accusing some folks of being grifters are themselves the biggest grifters of all. And that irony they don't see, and people don't realize that. And it's sometimes a little disappointing that, we don't have people that are a little bit more critical thinkers. But again, when everybody has a voice on social media, anybody has a voice. And so we have to be, as much as we might not like it or agree with it, we have to be respectful of that, meaning everybody gets a vote. Everybody has an opinion. And my only concern, as long as those opinions aren't opinions and motivated simply for clicks and likes, I'm okay with that. But when you create and manufacture artificial drama that doesn't exist for the sole purposes of just creating trauma and drama, I think we can do better. I think we deserve better. And by the way, look, mainstream media is no better sometimes. You know, they thrive off of drama. Yeah. That's how you get advertisers, right? It's a business. I remember in spy school, we had a person from a major network come over and explain to us, this was, by the way, the biggest at the time, explaining, you know, hey, look, don't forget, media is a business. We get paid by advertisers.
That's right.
To provide content. We are content providers, and in some cases can be content manufacturers, right? Holy crap. Now,
brought
wait a
to
minute.
you by Pfizer.
You know?
That's right.
So we need to recognize that. Not that it's not bad. We live in a capitalistic society, but we just need to be cognizant of that, right? And then be able to formulate our own opinions, at least recognizing that fact.
Yeah, I think sometimes the whole grifter argument turns into like that Spider-Man meme where all the Spider-Mans are like pointing at each other. Because it is just like, if you're going to define grifter as anyone who makes money on anything that has to do with something that they could be interested in or have some level of expertise in, then fucking everyone's a grifter.
Right.
But the actual definition is supposed to be, you know, more towards people who really don't know anything about some particular whatever and see it as an opportunity based on where there's interest.
Right, to capitalize, right.
Yeah, be a charlatan or whatever. But, you know, there's where people get more interested in the nitty gritty with the drama around this one is that all of you guys were talking about, you're all government involved. So already people's like, you know, their spidey senses are going off and going, all right, why are they telling us this stuff? You do see how that could be
I can understand that.
Like
I said, I take a playbook from a colleague of mine, Gary Nolan, Dr. Gary Nolan. He says, block early and block often. So I don't necessarily see a lot of that hate because my wife does a good job of blocking agent provocateurs, people that are just trying to, you know, create drama. And I prefer not to see that simply because it's not productive. I'm not asking people to agree with me. If you disagree with me, that's great. We can have a great conversation about that. Just be respectful.
Yeah.
Right. Stop going out there and using, you know, 4-letter obscenities to describe your hatred for something. Speak like an adult, right? And then we can have an adult conversation. But if you're just going to be like a 4-year-old petulant child and throw a temper tantrum, I don't have time for that. I don't have the bandwidth for it. I got way too many fish to fry. So to focus on it is counterproductive because there's only so many hours in the day, right? And so I can choose what I decide to apply my time towards.
I was telling you this last night off air, but it's relevant to bring up right now, you know, regarding guys like you who worked in like the intel side of government. For 20 plus years, your job was to make everything a secret.
Yeah.
You literally couldn't even go home and tell your wife.
That's right. That's right.
And so now you come out and maybe you're still working for the government. Maybe you're still doing a little something with them. But assuming you're not even for a second and you're coming out and now your job is to be public and say, you know, reveal information about what's going on, and now you're on social media, you are going from knowing one thing your whole life, secrecy, and no one even knows that I exist, to now not only do I exist and I'm on TV and everyone knows my name and they're talking about what I'm doing, but now all the people can come at me because I exist. And in a way, it's almost like you're ripping off this insane Band-Aid.
Okay, you're not helping with the paranoia.
Well, I'm just saying,
just so
like,
you know,
like
you're right.
Like
right.
I look at you, and I mean no offense by this, but it's almost like you're coming from that world of darkness, and now you're like in the light, and it's like being a 14-year-old girl all over again, freaked out at every fucking thing that's coming at you.
100%. It's one of the reasons why I live in Wyoming, where I live. I'm like, hey man, truth be told, I mean, I am a creature of the shadows. I spent my entire life. In fact, your life could depend on it, right? Mm-hmm. Anonymity. And now all of a sudden, you know, I tell people, they're like, well, what's it like to go from that life to a public life? I said, for me, it's some people thrive off it. Some people love it. For me, it's traumatic. It's like imagine being an albino cave newt, living in an albino cave newt. Pull it up.
You know what that is, Alessi? An albino cave newt?
Yes, they've gone blind because they've been living their life in the back recesses of caves. And I often tell people, if you want to know what it's like, imagine being an albino cave newt, and all of a sudden a bunch of school children come in for a field trip. All of a sudden one plucks you right out of your comfortable little cave and now is poking at you with all the other kids under the hot desert sun. That's what it's like.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. And so
this is an animal, not a person.
No.
Shit. I'm like picturing the guy in the Da Vinci Code coming out and going, "No, Soto."
No. It's a little.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
I got
a little amphibian that lives.
It's kind of cute.
Well, yeah, unless you're poking at him, then he probably doesn't like it very much.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it feels like. You know, I don't know how else to explain it. You know, I grew up as a kid very, I would consider myself an introvert. Everybody says, no, you're an extrovert, Lou. No, I'm not. I'm actually very introverted.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I am very introverted. You know, whenever the guys were going out and going to the sports bars and whatnot, I was at home, you know, inventing stuff, writing patents. That's
writing patents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What kind of patents?
Man, I hate talking about myself, man. I'm
that's why
giving
you're
you an
here,
example.
Lou.
I have a few patents. It's maritime industry. My wife says I'm like a puppy. If I get bored, I get destructive and I pee on the furniture and tear up the sofa. So
make some maritime patents.
So I try to keep myself busy. You know, gearhead.
Is this like cocaine submarines? Is that what you're doing?
No. If you type in my name, you'll see some of the patents. Just type in my name and type in patent, and it'll pull up. But you know, I never did these patents to make money or to sell them. I don't know. I was interested. I like seeing how things work, right? Probably why I got into intelligence to begin with. So,
no shit. Patents by inventor Luis Daniel Elizondo.
Yeah.
March 24, 2014. Interchangeable superstructures and hulls for ocean-going vessels. All right, can we take that out of Japanese? What does that mean?
Well, yeah. You don't really want to go there, do you?
I do want to go there.
Your audience doesn't want to hear about that.
I got ADD. We're down this. Let's go.
Your audience is going to, okay. Now
there's like fucking 20 of these.
Yeah, I know. I get bored. Oh, God.
Not enough going on at Guantanamo? You're sitting around being like, shut up, KSM. I'm building a fucking superstructure here.
This is embarrassing. I'm sorry. You know, look, I'm proof positive you don't have to be smart to be an inventor, okay? Anybody can be an inventor, trust me. Yeah, I just, you know, I find things interesting.
Okay.
So.
All right. Lou Elizondo, the patent king. Learning something new every day. So anyway, we've been going down some really good tangents here. It's good to get clarity on a lot of that, though, because obviously, you know, whether we like it or not, people talk about this stuff.
Sure.
It's important. The only other thing I can think of there, I think you've pretty much addressed everything, which, you know, people will still criticize, but I thought that was pretty good. The only other thing that some people try to claim that I've never seen evidence for is the Harry Reid letter. They try to say, like, Harry Reid just signed it. He didn't write it or whatever.
Dude,
now, where did that come from?
It came from him. I mean, I never even talked to him. Apparently, there was a news reporter, Gaddy Schwartz, who was doing an article and knew that, I guess, the Pentagon was up to some shenanigans and reached out to him. And he, on his own volition, did it. I had nothing. I didn't even know. I was surprised like everybody else. I'm like, wow. Because I never wanted to ask the boss because I thought, you know, it'd be inappropriate. It's like, look, you know, the guy's got enough on his plate and, you know, he doesn't need to be thrown into the mix of this crap. And all of a sudden, Gaddy's like, here it is.
Wow.
I was like, holy crap. But, you know, I can show you something else if you really want to see it. But you can't, you got to promise me. I'll show it to you.
Can't put it on there.
You can't put it on there. But I'd have
You have it with you?
Yeah, I got something for you. You want to see?
Yeah. Yeah, let's get this intermission while you see it. I will hold it straight to my face and not to the camera.
Face.
Is this like, can you tell people what I'm looking?
I'd rather not. I'd just rather you. So you are aware of the Harry Reid memo, right?
Uh-huh.
So that was it. So
I'm so curious. John Kiriaku's the last guy that did this, and he held up like a body of like KSM or Abu Zubaydah, I'm sorry, on the floor. Can't say what this is. Okay. Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Imagine if I released that.
A lot of tea right here. That is not what I was expecting to see. You just blue-balled the entire internet. That is... If whatever you're thinking I just saw is not what you're thinking, I'll put it that way.
But you can see why.
Yes, I can. Now it makes sense. Whoa.
Yeah.
They got the holsters out for you, man.
Sometimes you just have to walk the high road, and it's
good
tough.
for you.
And you know, there have been times I could settle a discussion very quickly if I wanted to, but it would be at the cost of other individuals. And I'm not a sellout. Never have been. Never, never, ever. I will never throw anybody under the bus to protect my own skin. Never have, never will.
See, I can't ask a follow-up question on that because we'll get too close to that. But off air, I'm going to ask you about that. Good for you. I mean, that would be the, what do you call it? Like the canary in the coal mine, if you will. Something like that. For sure. Okay. All right. Yeah. Sorry, everyone. That is what it is. But I saw what I saw. Anyway, so we started this off where we were talking about Tulsi Gabbard and the DNI position and what they have to do. And we were talking about the new administration and some of them like taking this whole threat in the sky thing seriously. But going back to the last administration, because obviously you've been involved publicly with discussing all this stuff since like 2017. So you've lived through the first Trump administration and the Biden administration. Was there any real communication with the Biden administration on this? Was there anyone
the
in?
National Security Council didn't even want to bring it up to him.
Really?
Yeah, we had, to protect, there's a very, very senior individual that was part of the Obama administration. I won't say who because I don't have permission to say it. And he wound up getting a position with the Biden administration in a very specific capacity. And he was going to champion this cause up at the National Security Council. Long story short, National Security Council did not want to have this conversation at all. And in fact, said, we're not even going to bring it up to the president. Now, maybe there's reasons for that. Okay, maybe there's medical reasons. Maybe there's cognitive reasons. Maybe there's operational and functional reasons. I don't know. But the bottom line is you're not going to tell the president you are just as guilty. You are guilty of the exact problem we've been saying, that the president is not being informed of certain programs, and you are part of that problem.
Yeah.
You on the National Security Council are not telling the boss what's going on. Who the hell are you?
That's right.
You're not the president, That's wait a minute. If you're making those decisions on behalf of the president and you don't have that authority, dude, don't look now, but you got problems.
Oh yeah.
Big problems, right? I mean, that's treason. That's how coups start. Coup d'etats when people in government start making unilateral decisions outside of legal avenues.
You mean like Kennedy?
I'm just saying, look, man, it's anybody in government, we all have an oath. We all take an oath to serve our country and to support and defend the Constitution and whatnot. No one has the right to not tell the president something. No one. As a chief executive of our nation, right? For someone to make a unilateral decision, say, I have this national security issue, but I'm not going to inform the president, that's a problem. That's a problem.
I completely
That's
agree.
criminal.
I completely agree with you. Not one bar of that is wrong. But do you not see why people like me and probably everyone listening would assume that still happens all the fucking time?
It does. That's exactly why we need good people in government. Exactly. Again, politics aside, you need people that are willing to speak truth to power. That is your job. And if you don't want to do that, or you can't do that, or you're afraid to do that, get the hell out and go do something else.
All right, let's look at this the other way though, less sinisterly. Okay, you had given the example earlier when you were talking about DNI about all the possible things that you'd have to read them in on. It's not even possible to do, on a read. Meaning, before you even go to do something, your job with whatever agency you're with or whatever team you're on within that agency to brief on this one thing, you already have to take, I don't know, I'll just use round numbers, 1,000 things and get it down to the top 4.
Right.
Maybe, even without anything sinister, there were more important things than the 996 things that you eliminated that you didn't put in the top 4 just from human error.
Sure.
And then it looks like you're not reading in whoever it is, the president,
but if it's a onesie and a twosie, I got it. But when week after week after week, look, you got Chinese spy balloons wafting over North America, and you're telling people there's nothing to worry about. You have drones that have been encountered all over the place, even over politicians' houses, and the response is, no, we don't know what they are, but they're legal. Wait, what?
Yeah.
But there's a fundamental problem when you have over and over again the same thing. When you have a priority, if you start having something happening over and over and over again, that all of a sudden now rises to the top of the list. I can understand if you're number 480 in priorities and you're only briefing the top 10 priorities, but over time you keep having this happen, you start going up
100%,
right? And so how are you not having the conversation? I don't understand. And then trying to ignore it on top of that and say, oh, there's nothing to see here, folks. That's egregious. You already have elected members of Congress having these things. They have governors of states saying, look, it's over my house, right? You have the military closing down military bases. You don't close down a military base if something's being lawfully flown over your airspace.
Yeah.
You know, it's complete BS, and it's very frustrating to see. And this is why I remain much more optimistic with this administration on their stance on UAP disclosure and drone disclosure and transparency. Because look, America deserves to know the truth.
Absolutely.
You know, stop treating us like children, even though sometimes we behave like children. You know, there's a responsibility to inform the American people about what's going on. And I don't believe it's in anyone's best interest in government to keep that information sequestered from the American people.
I agree with you. Back on, I believe it was Friday December 13th, when this was really suddenly like, whoa, what the fuck is going on? Because we live here in Jersey and all this stuff was above. I'm going to have Alessi chime in a minute because he lives out where it was really happening. But like, I got a bunch of guys on the phone. Unfortunately, a lot of them were off record, completely understand why. Like guys that can't come on the podcast, but I've been connected to. And I had multiple, I think it was 3 different people who don't work together in different phases tell me some version of like the same thing. I'm not going to say exactly what that was, but the common theme across them and then the other 3 or 4 people I talked to outside them was that this turned into something. It's going to be fine, but the fact that it even got here is a disgrace because this could have been nipped in the bud fucking 2 months ago.
Absolutely.
So that's in line with what you've heard.
Yes, and the fact that for 2 months we had no idea what the hell's going on, and then finally come out and be like, well, we don't know, but it's not a threat, just made the problem even worse, right? Then people say, all right, dude, you know, this is, how can you say that? How can you say something's not a threat and yet still say we have no idea its origins or capabilities and who's behind it? I mean, that is the last thing you'd want to do as a government to try to instill faith and confidence.
100%. Now, I do want to bring in Alessi here because, like I said, he lives out in Bedminster. So Alessi's got a great YouTube channel called his name, Alessi Alaman. And you did, let's make sure we put the link to it down below. You did a 1-hour investigation video that featured James Fox, Jim DiOrio, and actually, in this case, more importantly, people on the ground there who had witnessed this. And why don't you tell people like what they were saying?
Yeah, so I was a witness, and then there was like at least 10 to 15 people I spoke to, a lot who didn't want to go on camera that just saw what they saw. And when it started happening after Thanksgiving, when most people started seeing these things, everyone in like the Ring app, the neighborhood app was like, are you guys seeing this? Are you seeing this? And you would look up, and a lot of people, I will say, had no idea what planes look like for the most part. Like, there were so many that were literally planes. And it was like, that is a plane. Go onto this app. You can see the plane coming across.
That's a 737 to LaGuardia.
Exactly. Like almost 90% of them were like that. But then you definitely had images and videos of drones.
And then, how low would they be?
Oh, very low. Like less than 100 feet. Like
that's what I'm saying.
You could see them very low. And from what I saw, the few times I saw them, it was like there was 2 types. There was the DG prong ones that aren't the DG that people think, but they were 4-prong, and they were making a noise, a slight buzz, but you could see they were going slow enough where you're like, that's not a plane. A plane is going to go way faster. And
because you have to have lift. You have to have a certain velocity in order to maintain lift or you crash.
Exactly. And there was one witness, this one lady who had the best account where she was about 5 minutes from Trump's golf course. And she said every night for 2 weeks, she would see the same pattern of the drones showing up in the same place, going in a pattern where it's like one, and then they said a minute and a half later, another one would show up right when it hit dark, and she would see this pattern, and she showed me the video, and it was
we call that a racetrack.
Yeah, a racetrack?
Racetrack pattern, yeah. And in fact, if you, I'll add something here. If you get on Google and type in mysterious drones and type in Nebraska or Colorado 2019, look what pops up.
Interesting. Because she also had it down to the second, right, Alessi?
Yeah.
People think this is new.
It was like 88 seconds or something?
Yeah.
She was timing it.
People think this is new. We've been dealing with this. There you go. 2020 to the...
Son of a bitch.
Yeah. So
2019-20 Colorado drone sightings. Hit that.
And it's been local law enforcement was involved. FBI was involved.
Can I read this, Lou, for people to have context?
It's Wikipedia. Cool? Yeah. I mean, if I were you, I would probably go ahead and look at actually a news media This is Wikipedia, which tends to be
Good
sometimes
man.
watered down.
Good man.
You mean Wikipedia's run by the CIA? Is that what we're saying, Elizondo?
Sometimes worse.
Oh. All right, go back, Alessi, because there was an article right there.
Yeah.
I like that our intel guy's telling us not to go on Wikipedia.
The Guardian?
All right, attack of the drones.
Or even Warzone, whatever. There's there's a lot of reputable.
Okay, so this is from July 16th, 2020. What did the headline say, Alessi? Newly released FAA documents give unprecedented look into Colorado drone swarm mystery. Now let's go down. Perfect. All right, so as covered in previous reports by the Warzone, law enforcement agencies in numerous rural counties in eastern Colorado and adjacent areas in Nebraska and Kansas, this was widespread, received an influx of reports of large drones flying in formations at night for a period of several weeks during December 2019 and early January 2020.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, many law enforcement personnel were among the reporting witnesses. In short order, the mystery drone wave also elicited serious expressions of concern from at least 2 U.S. senators and attention from Colorado's governor and state public safety agency. The activity soon drew the attention of regional and later national news media as well. I don't really remember that, though, so it didn't get that loud of attention.
It did. Oh, absolutely it did. I mean, it was 2019. A lot of people, forget what happened yesterday. But
yeah, 2019 was a good year.
all over the It was all over the place. And you can see they had trained observers, law enforcement, even the FBI was involved, and still came up bingo. I have no idea what it was.
Alessi, were a lot of these people reporting the drones as being in the range of SUV size?
Yeah. So the one I saw and what these people saw, they were they were massive. Like you looked at those things, you're like, that thing, if it fell out of the sky, and you could comment however you want about this, but when people are saying shooting them down, I understand the point of view where it's like if they shot it down, this thing could like crush someone. They could kill multiple people.
They had the same sightings of those large drones in this, and they were actually kicking off smaller drones. So think about that capability for a minute, right? And they were autonomously controlled, flying in a very specific grid pattern. As you see here, it says here, however, to conclude that there is high confidence these are not covert military activities. This is coming from senior FAA officials, right? So, all right, then whose is it? And who's got the money and the resources and logistics to coordinate something like this, where you have drones that, frankly, at the time were state of the art, and then you have loiter capability. Let's take this. Let's pretend these glasses are a drone.
Okay.
And you guys, being in the YouTube generation and whatnot, you guys know you can buy drones anywhere, commercially available, right? And they can fly maybe 15 minutes, little quad, and then you got to land and you got to recharge them. And maybe they fly a couple miles. Imagine now the technology it takes to fly a large drone the size of an SUV. Now, do we have them? We do. Most of them are fixed wing because they have to loiter. To have one the size of a SUV that's using propellers, helicopter-like propellers, right, for lift, requires a tremendous amount of energy because you have to not only maintain movement forward, but you also have to maintain lift. Unlike a fixed wing drone, that as long as you're moving forward, the air kind of does the work for you and you stay aloft, right? So think of a Predator drone. That's why a Predator drone looks like it does, because it's got to stay on station. It's got to loiter for hours and hours and hours. So if you're looking at a SUV-sized drone, there's only 2 types of fuel you could consider. One would be liquid fuel, like let's say gasoline or Jet A fuel, which is very heavy, about 7.5 pounds per gallon. So you're now talking something super robust, or it's going to be electric, right? Which is also very heavy. If you ever own a Tesla, they're not super light cars because the battery weighs a lot, and so now that limits a lot of things that you can do. Now you can have more range and you can have longevity, right? You can fly further and for longer, but it's really, really expensive, meaning you have to have an entire infrastructure there to do it. Then if you're flying in some cases, like some of these drones flew for 10, 12 miles, now you're talking over the horizon, right? So what does that mean? Here's our little drone here. If I want to communicate with this drone and control it, I have to be line of sight because it's radio frequency controlled. If I want to fly this over the horizon where I don't have a signal, now I need more infrastructure. I either need an aircraft, airborne, that will retransmit my signal to the drone, or I need some sort of space-based capability or some sort of repeater capability to amplify my signal and send it over the horizon to control the drone, and vice versa. And then I have a issue of launching it without people seeing me, right? Where am I going to launch an SUV-sized drone? Then I've got to recover it. I've got to go out and actually pick it back up. And oh, by the way, I got to maintain it as well. And I've got to give it its fuel source whenever I want to fly it, right? So you're talking about a very big endeavor. This is not just, hey, somebody making a car-sized drone and they're a hobbyist in their garage and flying it. This would take a lot of people to do, just to fly one, let alone a fleet of them, right? And then there's reports where some of these may even have some sort of counter-drone capability or technology. There was
drone?
Yes, there were some reports that somebody would fly their own drone to try to get a closer look at the drone and would get disabled and fall to the ground.
Woo! I didn't hear about this.
Oh yeah, yeah.
No shit.
So now you're talking about a level of sophistication here that really, at this point, can only be state-sponsored, right? There's only a few countries in the world that know how to have that type of capability and get away with it, and no one has any idea who's behind it, right? Where are you launching it from? How are you recovering it? How many do you have? Do you have a big boat out in the ocean that you're launching them from? Well, we would see that. So, okay, well, maybe you're launching them from a submarine. Well, okay, so now you have a submarine in U.S. territorial waters. That's a problem, right? That's scary. Yeah. So you see, it's a very slippery slope here. And that's why it's probably, for some people, better to have the conversation saying, don't pay attention, folks. Nothing, no big deal here. We're handling it.
But again, to go to the front end of it, it's like this was the cat that got out of the bag that it sounded like, based on the people I spoke to, this should have been nipped in the bud at the beginning, but it wasn't.
Correct.
Who failed there?
A lot of people. So I'll tell you, when I was 2013, 2014, I was part of what they call the U.S. Air Domain Awareness Working Group, and it was co-sponsored by DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and FAA. And it had all the folks there from the intel community and whatnot, because they realized that the emerging threat of drones was real. Mm-hmm. And when you asked somebody, okay, so who's responsible for this? Everybody did this. Everybody pointed at each other.
No.
Say it isn't so. Like, well, not my responsibility, you know. Clearly we're still in the same position. So that's why, one of the reasons why I really applaud Tulsi Gabbard doing what she's doing. She said, look, we're going to get to the bottom of this. The American people deserve to know. We're going to let them know what's going on. Now,
Trump had said when he got into office, because he was during this transitional period when this was going on, that he was like, we're going to let you know exactly what it was. They should have told you. And then
God, you do that good.
I don't know, like 5 days into office, they did say at the, I guess, like the press secretary briefing that, oh, nothing to see here. It was just regular. What did she say exactly, Alessi? It was like, it was just regular. I know what it is.
Yeah, she said basically it's all authorized airplanes and drones. The reality is two things. First of all, let me caveat this. I would certainly never say anything against the administration, but I think there's
that
two
you
things.
Want a job in?
No, that I want to help anybody who is president succeed.
You, Let me rep you. I got
you. Look, first and foremost, in the 5 days that they had actually been in office, they were using information from the old administration. That's a fact. It's the information that the last administration had, and they're like, well, this is what we found.
Well, that's trustworthy.
Right. And then the second issue is that these folks were only in office for 5 days. Now think about that. 5 days. There is a whole lot you have to do when you're coming in as a new administration. You haven't even kept the seats warm yet, right? I mean, everything is in flux. You haven't even moved in your furniture yet. So I think we need to give them a break. I think we need to give them, unlike the last administration that had 4 years to figure this out, this was 5 days, 96 hours, maybe a little bit more. That's not a whole lot of time. And you're relying on information from a previous administration. So it's a little unfair. I think people get critical and say, oh, this is bullcrap. Hold on, chill your jets for a second. Give them some time. Let the people look. Half the cabinet hasn't even been confirmed yet.
But they already do. So here's the devil's advocate to that. They already don't trust the last administration. So 5 days, I understand, like he made a promise that they wanted to give some information, whatever they could, when they came in. Wouldn't it be good then to caveat that statement with, look, we're working off what the old administration said, but we are still looking into this ourselves because it's weird shit?
So I would, again, let me be really careful here. I would never, ever, ever make a recommendation to administration on how they employ their strategic communications, right? There's a whole calculus that goes into what we say and how we say it, right? Because you have to understand that words have an impact. and they can create action.
That's
and
right.
Some of that action's good. Some of that action's not good. Like being in a crowded movie theater and screaming fire, right? You got to understand there's a responsibility there. So I think what they were doing is A, fulfilling a promise. 2, basically saying, okay, we're going to go ahead and give the American people what we are being told, with the understanding that we can go back anytime we want as information changes, right? What did we talk about in the beginning of this conversation? As facts change, I change my mind, right? And I think that is probably where this conversation will eventually go. And again, let me just caveat again. I am not, nor will I ever speak on behalf of the administration or any administration without their approval to do so. And I can only imagine what they have on their plate, right? So we have to be, I think the average American doesn't really appreciate what a new administration has to go through when they first come in. It's monumental. It's almost mind-boggling, the stuff you're now responsible for. Like, oh my God, I'm responsible for this. And oh, by the way, that guy was in the middle of doing that. And holy crap, now how do I unwind 4 years of policies that, maybe I don't agree with, and at the same time move the country forward in a direction that I think we need to go in. And then do that all the while everybody's sniping at people. Like I cry and moan and complain about the haters online. I could not imagine as a political figure what they have to endure. I mean, the visceral hatred, right? And vitriol that is in social media and mainstream media to some degree. I don't know if I can handle it. And I have a tough enough time right now with the few haters that I have. I couldn't imagine it, constantly being attacked every single day by everybody and their mom. So I get it. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm very optimistic. The American people are going to get, at least in this topic of UAP and drones and airspace domain awareness, we're going to get some significant progress in the next 4 years on this topic.
That was a really good tryout speech right there. You're speaking well.
You're killing me, man.
Yeah, we got it all on camera too. We can send them the reel. Be like, yo, picture this, but on CNN.
No, you know
and
what?
You'll win.
First of all, I've got this. I've got tattoos, and I've got too many skeletons in my closet.
Yeah, that makes you relatable.
Yeah, no. Listen,
now.
when I was with a long time ago when I was a kid, like I said, I did every crap job you could to earn money, and one of those jobs was. A little embarrassing. So I let's just say I don't fit. I don't. Well, not quite, but yeah. Look, man. You're a dumb kid. You got to do what you got to do to get through school. Right. And anyways, let's just say I probably don't fit the mold of a senior executive in the U.S. government.
Okay. TBD.
Too many tattoos and this weird facial hair that I have, and
TBD. Maybe if you teach them how to build a bunker,
yeah,
they'll want that expertise and overlook the old stuff. But let's not get off the topic here as to what we're talking about with what these drones are and
right.
trying to break it down, because like you are someone who you studied what's in the sky and things like that. First question would be, through your sources, without revealing people, are you aware of conversations that may have happened at, I don't know, some sort of official level within the government itself, not at the intel, meaning like maybe intel briefing people in Congress or things like that prior to these drones becoming a news story?
Yeah,
like, was it known
100%.
that it was going to be okay.
Yeah.
So they knew it was coming.
Well, no, what I meant to say is that people knew that this was a problem. U.S. air domain awareness has been a problem forever, and we've just ignored it. And now the technology has caught up to the point where now we're behind the 8 ball.
What do you think it was?
Look, let me give you an example here. Type, you got to Google again. Type in 1999 FBI investigation, White House remote-controlled airplanes.
1999 FBI investigation, White House remote-controlled airplanes.
Let's see what pops up.
JFK Jr.?
No, there's it might have been, it was late 1990, so it might have been actually 1998. There's a 9/11 Commission report. There was a plan that the FBI foiled by 2 individuals who were arrested, who were going to fly remote-controlled airplanes that had explosives on board.
Top one, ALESSI.
And they were going to, try that one. Scroll down. There was
fence jumpers.
No, it was a remote controlled.
Go back.
Hit back. Type in takeaway. 1990s White House investigation. Scroll down to a study from 1990s. Helicopter may have approved.
Why did the world's most advanced electronics? No.
Here, I'll pull that up.
Yeah, this is a tough one.
Type in FBI investigation. White House remote controlled airplanes, and that should pull it up for you.
Okay. So
I actually used this in a briefing when I was in the government to explain on how they were going to use remote controlled airplanes. Terrorist threat confronting the United States. I'll pull it up here. Give me a second.
This is a tough one. Okay.
Yeah, it was a while ago, but we used it. It was an FBI investigation. I'll pull it up here.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, just while you're pulling this up, to comment that, we've had drones around now, like just within mom and pop being able to use in the air for so long. And you'll just see people randomly fly it. I'll walk out here along the Hudson River and motherfuckers are putting drone up in the air. And it's usually a small little thing, obviously. But they'll fly up pretty high into what is quite literally airspace. And to this point, I mean, you pointed out the 2019-2020 thing in Colorado, which is interesting. I was less familiar with that. But to this point, we don't have a ton of examples, Lou, where like this really interfered and became like a national headline, yet the technology's been around for so long.
Well, here you go. So here's FBI.gov. This is on the FBI's website. Okay. Massachusetts man charged with plotting attack on Pentagon using remote-controlled aircraft filled with C4 plastic explosives. So I will pull that up for you right now so you can see it.
This is in the 90s.
Yeah, here you go. FBI webpage. Well, there it goes all the way back to the 90s. That might be even a more recent one.
All right, I'm going to read this off the phone because Lou found this here. This is from September 28th, 2011. A 26-year-old Ashland man was arrested and charged today in connection with his plot to damage or destroy the Pentagon and U.S. Capitol using large remote-controlled aircraft filled with C4 plastic explosives. Rezwan Ferdows, a U.S. citizen, was also charged with attempting to provide material support and resources to a foreign terrorist organization, specifically to al-Qaeda, in order to carry out attacks on U.S. soldiers stationed overseas. Our top priority is to protect our nation from terrorism and national security threats. The conduct alleged today shows that Mr. Ferdows had long pledged. This is a long U.S. attorney comment. Okay, I got you.
But this just gets to show you, and even a decade before that, we were dealing with it. So, the technology may have changed and evolved, but the application and tactics have not. This is nothing new. And so this is a big concern for us. It really is, because drones now can be used to do all sorts of stuff. We're seeing in the Ukraine and Russia where they're literally hunting down soldiers and blowing them up, right? If that's
it's crazy. Those videos are nuts.
Right. So, and that is just field expediency using commercial drones. You can imagine with a little bit of, and I want to be really careful, we'll never say this over here, but if you have an imagination, you could do some really bad things for cheaply against the American people. So this is why this is a national priority for us. This is why I think one of the reasons why Tulsi Gabbard realizes we need to get to the bottom of this drone issue. We need to have good policy. Remember we talked about policies? We need to have good policies in place now on how we're going to go ahead and regulate the use of drones using FAA and maybe pre-coordinated flight plans and transponders, right? So you can squawk friendly so you know if it's a helicopter or a plane using your app or a drone, right? Or if you're just going to be a commercial drone, that commercial drones or Probius drones can only be so big so you can't put a huge payload on them. And, you geofence them, right? So they can only be flown maybe a mile from your location. Unless you have special permission, maybe if you're in the film industry, you can get a license to, where you go through a background check, maybe like DHS does when you want to TSA, right? You want to get on a TSA pre-list so you can fly through security. Maybe you do the same thing with drone pilots, right? You say, okay, for those of you who use this as a business, you're going to go through a quick background check and you'll be authorized to fly these drones. But you're not going to have a 10-year-old kid be able to go to Hobby Lobby or anywhere else and buy a drone and now be able to fly completely unregulated. That's an issue. You don't let a 10-year-old drive a car. Why would you let them drive a drone, right?
Yeah.
You can do just as much damage.
Yes.
So there's things that we can do, I think, that can certainly low-hanging fruit to solve this problem quickly.
Do you think that...
And this is why we needed, by the way, national strategy that I've been advocating for. We need
what does that look like?
Well, it's a comprehensive approach, hopefully done by someone either at the National Security Council or someone like Tulsi Gabbard as a director of national intelligence, whoever that is, that says, okay, as an intelligence community, here are the vulnerabilities we have. These are what we need in order to fix the problem, whether it's operational, whether it's policy, whether it's whatever it may be. These are the 5, 6 objectives, enterprise objectives, mission objectives, milestones, deliverables, benchmarks, right? All the things that healthy governments use to make sure that they are executing the will of the American people. And it's not that hard. It's really not that hard. There's a couple levers that would probably low-hanging fruit that we could do immediately that would help solve 80% of the problem, and then the next year spend the rest fixing the rest.
Seeing how, like, this article you had pulled up was from 2011, and it's some guy that was obviously plotting to use C4 on the White House or whatever. But
C4, think about that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Not just, a bunch
C4.
of M80s and firecrackers.
Yeah.
C4.
Right. So obviously, like, that could have been an insane breach right there, that a lot of people's lives could have been lost. But seeing as this technology, like I said, has now been around for so long and everyone's using it, do we have, I don't know, like at the Pentagon, for example, like outside the building itself, not necessarily an iron dome like Israel has, but something in that type of family to where if anything comes within a mile of that airspace.
So I'm not going to speak on what capabilities the Pentagon or any other government organization might or might not have. We do invest in counter-drone technology as a government to protect our personnel overseas. And one may infer that maybe we've even used some of that technology here domestically. I don't want to address specific either capabilities or vulnerabilities, but if you do go to the Pentagon, you see these signs that say no drone zone for a very specific reason. There's several ways you can kill a drone. You can do it kinetically. So you can think of, shooting an object at it and disabling it. You can also do it electronically. These things fly with servos and electronics, and if you understand their frequencies, you can in some cases jam it, what we call, electronic countermeasures. So there are ways to do that as well. The science isn't really perfect, but it's pretty good. Now, of course, if you're a foreign adversary, then what do? Well, you harden it. So now you shield it. So now you can't use electronic capabilities, right? And it's kind of this cat and mouse, tit for tat, where, okay, you do this, well, I do that. Well, you do this, I do that. My concern is that if you have a fox in the hen house situation, there are, when I was growing up, radar detectors as a kid were really, you bought them because you're speeding, unfortunately, and you don't want to pay the ticket. So a lot of kids my age, we all had radar detectors in our vehicles. We didn't realize that a lot of those radar detectors were actually being manufactured by the radar manufacturers that the police use. And so what wound up happening is that the same companies that were selling you the radar detector would then develop a new capability to outfox it, right, with the radar. And then they turn around and sell you another radar detector that could detect laser and X-band and Ka band, right? And so it's
planned obsolescence.
Yeah. So you want to make sure kind of, there's a couple other examples that I won't use. You want to make sure that's not the situation here, right? Where drone manufacturers are also creating the counter-drone capabilities. And then, maybe they're not, again, I want to be very careful because I'm not accusing anybody of doing that, but we just need to make sure that's not happening.
For sure. That would be a huge problem. Let's speak hypothetically right here. I'm going to emphasize this is hypothetically.
Okay, hypothetical.
Yes.
Got it.
What do you think these drones were?
Well, I think there are many things. It's pretty clear that you listen to the eyewitness testimony, which I don't think, most of the people are rational, sane human beings. They know what a plane is and they know what a drone is. Some of these drones were recorded and they have the whirring sound of a typical little quadcopter. It's a drone and it's blinking and it's whatnot. The lights on it are consistent with a drone. Then you have other reports where these things are the size of an SUV. These things don't have the lights that normal drones have, and the frequency in which they're blinking. They're not blinking navigational lights in green and red like aircraft, but they're blinking different colors and not in a consistent pattern with navigational lights, right? So people don't realize this. Navigational lights are just like an automobile. When you turn on your blinker, the reason why your Honda versus your Chevrolet versus your Ford or your Ferrari all have that same blinker period is because it's regulated. You know, if you want to build a car and have it be a car manufacturer, when you turn the blinker on, that little relay in there and the resistor are calibrated to blink at a certain frequency. The same is true with navigation lights, right? They're regulated. And that's why we can tell when something's an airplane. When you have something the size of an SUV that's flying silently, right? No whirring sound. We might be dealing with a different type of technology. Also, you might be dealing with something, if it has a counter drone capability, that's even more problematic because that's new. We're not used to drones having counter drone capability, right? That's something new. And then you have these things in some cases miles out in the ocean that are in some cases following U.S. Coast Guard vessels, right? That's not a quadcopter. That's something different. And so, and then you also have people misidentifying, right? I saw one with, oh, this is a drone. No, it's not. It's actually a helicopter. It's a Bell Jet Ranger, right? I mean, it's clear.
There's a lot of
misidentification. Yes. And then you've got, the possibility that if I was a foreign adversary and I saw what was going on, hey, now's the time to test my stuff because everybody's kind of in a panic mode. So let's see what I can get away with.
Oh, right? Meaning after the fact.
Sure.
They sneak it in there.
Right. And then you've got the other issue where if some of these are really exotic, then maybe you're dealing with a UAP, hypothetically, right? We're talking hypothetical. Let's say you have a military base, you're the commander of a military base. In the old days, you had helicopters. If something kind of breached the perimeter, you could send out a security force and a helicopter or two. We realized we can use drones a lot cheaper and a lot more effectively than 2 helicopters. I can send out a fleet of these things, have my entire base geofenced, and if something crosses the border, these things can automatically deploy and prosecute the target, or if you will, conduct the surveillance for me, and much more efficiently than a helicopter crew. So imagine, let's say hypothetically, again, you have this UAP, some unidentified thing coming over your military base, and in response, you send out a fleet of drones to start doing the racetrack and start looking at, okay, what are we dealing with here, right? So some people report something the size of an SUV that's silent, that's not blinking, that can disappear into thin air, and then all of a sudden somebody reports 20 minutes later, no, it was a quadcopter, I heard it roaring, and it was over my house, and here's a video, here's a blinking light. That's also a possibility, that one could be predicating something else, a response. So what people are seeing are both. That's a possibility as well. And then there's other possibilities. We could go down for hours and hours on the what ifs. I'm very careful not to say what something is or is not because we need more data, but all these are possibilities. And it certainly wouldn't be outside the realm of logic.
Your example of potentially while this is going on and the mass hysteria starting over it, a foreign adversary sneaking a little one in there.
Absolutely.
That could make a lot of sense to me. The one that didn't make sense to me was that when people were saying at the front end of this, the whole thing was like, oh, some Iranian submarine released all these drones and they're over New Jersey now because we didn't know they were. That seems ridiculous to me because it feels like those would have been taken out quietly and without any fanfare immediately because it was so obvious. It's not like some of those videos you'll see of like Chinese drones where it's like a fucking bird, like a literal bird or something like that. It's like undercover. These things were, you could see what they were. Right. Like something that overt being, some foreign country doing it. That
but
seems
look how
ridiculous.
long it took us to shoot down the Chinese spy balloons.
Yeah, and what were, like, let's go back to that. That was February 2023. Mm-hmm. Like, is that all they were? They were just Chinese spy balloons?
Well, that's all. That's a pretty big deal because if I can put intelligence equipment on it, I can put anything on it. Yeah. Right? I have a problem with that. It's like people say, well, I don't mind people videoing me. Okay, fine, or taking a picture, but what about in your bathroom? Is that a problem? Right.
Or sucking up all the data.
Right. So, the fact that we didn't know about them, and then it turns out later that maybe we did, we just never told the president. And
that's crazy.
Right. Again, this is my point. Who are you to not who are you to make the decision to not tell the president what the hell's going on? Right? That's a problem.
Well, tell someone. I don't know if he would have even interpreted it, but he was kind of gone at that point. But tell somebody. Like, get it. Right. Like that stuff was floating up there a while. You're right. There were, if I remember correctly, though, there were, maybe I'm wrong about this, 2 or 3 of them, something like that. With these drones, we're not talking about 2 or 3.
No, we're not.
This was like a fucking army.
We're talking, that's right, something very well coordinated for weeks. And then you have the other theories of, well, maybe they were trying to sniff out radioactive type material. And people say, oh, that's a bunch of hogwash. But it's not.
Can you explain that?
Sure. Some folks had speculated that these drones actually were sponsored by the U.S. government and they're on some sort of secret mission. That maybe perhaps there was a chemical or biological or a nuclear device that was had gone rogue, basically broken arrow situation where we have a loose weapon,
like a dirty bomb,
or maybe not dirty. You know, could be the real deal. And so the idea is to try to use drones in a manner at night, so you're not being seen too much and panicking the public, to go ahead and sweep and see if you can pick up traces. Now, sniff.
Yeah.
Now, people say, well, that technology doesn't work. Take a look on Google. Once again, that technology's had it for a long time. There are certain capabilities we've had in the past to monitor nations' development of nuclear weapons. I'm not going to go into detail here, but there is stuff in the open source where you can see, where you can actually detect if a country is developing a particular capability because of air particles. And that's something that's been discussed at length. It's all over. In fact, if you get on Google, you'll see it. I don't want to say anything really much more than that, but type in nuclear sniffer.
You want the word drone in there too?
Nope.
Just
nuclear sniffer.
All right, the WC-15 Constant Phoenix, also known as the Nuke Sniffer, is a United States Air Force aircraft that detects nuclear explosions by collecting samples from the atmosphere.
So, case in point, right? We have that technology. It's not new. And so my point to this whole conversation regarding this is that, yes, you can actually detect trace amounts of nuclear material through air particulates. And it's a mission that even the Air Force admits we do.
All right, I want to play another hypothetical here because this is very relevant. I mean, let's call it what it is. We have multiple wars going on around the world right now, all kinds of like potential, boiling kettles of shit happening where, the wrong spark goes off and suddenly kaboom, no pun intended. But there was a piece of not fabricated information, but fabricated with the context information that was happening on Twitter back when this was going on, where someone took a screenshot from, I don't remember the name of the organization, but it's something that it's like the national, it's where they track any nuclear threats or whatever nationally. And basically the way I understand it is you're required to report anything on there, like literally anything. So the screenshot that they were pointing around, they're like, oh my God, there's a nuke in New Jersey or something like that.
Oh, you're talking about the medical equipment.
Yeah, it was actually like medical equipment. It had it had some sort of waste material with it. So they were required, some fucking doctor dropped it on the side of the road. It wasn't like a big deal. So that wasn't the actual thing. But on that idea, if, for example, a foreign adversary of some sort, doesn't matter who, we're able to get not even necessarily like a full-blown nuke, but something crazy, something powerful through the Port of Elizabeth right here, where there's, I don't know, God knows, thousands and thousands of containers that are coming in every day.
What a nightmare situation that would be.
You pay off some fucking guy named Vinny, pays off another guy named Carmine, money's green, suddenly you got a little bomb in New Jersey. If you had that type of breach and you were any administration, doesn't matter who you are, that is or intel, that is such an embarrassment that this would have gotten in, and also the type of situation that I call the Joker scenario, right? If you come around, like, remember in The Dark Knight when the Joker's like, if everything's going according to plan, no one freaks out. You say you're going to blow up a grocery store. Okay, you blow up a busload of soldiers. But if you say that one little innocent mayor is going to be blown up, then everyone loses their mind, right? Like that whole thing. If you had that scenario happen where suddenly you said to people, we don't know where, we don't know when, we don't know how, but there's some sort of fucking potential dirty bomb floating around. We don't think they're going to use it, but just keep going about business as usual. The nuclear sniffers are here. Then there's mass panic in society. Right. Meaning you already let the cat out of the bag by letting it in. And now you're in a situation where you actually can't be transparent because you need people to know, like, all right, probably nothing's going to happen, but we can't have people freaking out so that it's like fucking Mad Max Fury Road getting out of here.
Correct. There was a... if you want to see something really scary, I believe it was Lebanon, and I believe it was maybe,
Ooh, Alessi already
fertilizer,
knows.
right? It wound up being fertilizer.
What is this, Alessi?
It wasn't even a bomb. And
You know about it. You've seen it.
Okay.
It literally looks like an atomic weapon going off, and it's fertilizer on a boat.
Oh yes, yeah. Alessi showed me this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now look at that, right?
Whoa.
That is one hell of an explosion.
Do we know like the spread of that? I mean, it looks huge on camera, but like
it was huge. It was huge. I mean, look what it does. It decimated. Watch this.
whew,
Right. And that's fertilizer, guys.
that's just fertilizer.
From my understanding, if I remember correctly, it was due to a ship that had come into port, and the fertilizer had ignited. Now look at that shockwave, right?
That's so crazy.
Right, and so that is not even someone deliberately trying to blow something up. That's just a bonehead mistake that was done, and you can see what happened, right? So yeah, you're right. That's terrifying, and we've got to be careful. That's part of the reasons why we have the SAFE Act, S-A-F-E, and the DHS had created a law that they were going to go ahead and at one point inspect something like 99 or 100% of all cargo. Congress passed a law actually, and finally DHS said we can't. Port authorities, we just don't have the manning to inspect all our cargo.
Scary.
Yeah, scary. Right. So we got to pay attention to stuff. There's bad actors out there that will do bad things at any opportunity they can. And so that's why, one of the reasons why I'm always very pro-government. People, why are you pro-government? Because they're the ones every day doing their job, busting their ass to save yours. Yeah. That's what they're doing every day. And the fact that you can go around and bitch and moan about, the government shows you that it works. It's the best country in the world because you have that right and privilege. You didn't even have to go to war. You didn't have to join the army. You weren't conscripted into the military, unlike North Korea, where I guess men can have something like 17 haircuts that are authorized by the government and women have like 22, something ridiculous like that. I mean, here you're free. And the cost of freedom is that you'd have to have, you have to have vigilance on the fence line. Imagine and this is not meant to be derogatory at all. This is just an analogy. Imagine you have, some peaceful sheep all within a little fenced-in area. Mm-hmm. Make no mistake, outside that fence, there's wolves that want to eat the sheep, and they're always there, right? So you need these protectors, these dogs that maybe look a little funny to the sheep and maybe sound a little funny, maybe smell kind of funny, but that's your line of defense between the wolves and the sheep. They're there doing that job to protect the rest of us, right? And so that's why, I'm not anti-government. I'm super pro our government. I think we have the best country in the world. This country gave opportunities to my family that no other country could. My father was in the Bay of Pigs. He was a revolutionary. He was in prison, right? And this country gave us all the opportunity to be who we are today. So I am fiercely loyal, unapologetically loyal. This is the greatest nation in the world. But we have to do our part. Freedom isn't free. Freedom requires sacrifice. It's another reason why I don't like to talk about my military experience because, people say, oh, you're a hero. No, I'm not. Because the real heroes I've talked to aren't here to tell their story.
Yeah, we were talking about that off camera. And because I asked you right before we got on, I asked you about that, like why you don't like delving into that. And if you don't mind me saying, you said part of it is like, and I can cut this out after if you don't.
No, it's imposter syndrome.
Right.
Yeah, don't cut it out. This is it. The reality is that, look, there's men and women out there who have done more for their country and paid the ultimate sacrifice. So for me or anybody else that I work with and colleagues of mine that comes, I'm a big hero. No, you're not. Because the real heroes are the ones that never came back. The real heroes are the single moms or husbands that had to be left behind and raise a child and go to PTA meetings and put food on the table and do homework while the other service member was out fighting war, right? And try to keep a normal life. Or as I've said before, it's the female pilot who's running low on fuel for her helicopter, but instead of abandoning her little ducklings behind, she stays on target. She stays there until her helicopter runs out of fuel and crashes, right? Those are the heroes. And so those are the ones that I pay much deference to. And that's why one of the reasons I don't like to talk about my military service or my government service, because frankly, there's a lot of people out there that deserve a hell of a lot more credit than I do.
Well, I always, this argument or topic of what is the government's role and how does it, when people talk about it leaning towards totalitarianism and things like that. Yeah, it's interesting that you say, I don't mean this in a derogatory way when you give the example with like the sheep and the dogs protect them. And I know why you say that, obviously, because of what people say about like us being sheep and things like that. But to me, the buck,
or the dogs being warmongers, right?
Right.
You can't win either, no matter what.
You can't win. Argument. But the buck stops somewhere, right? It either stops with the government or it stops with the people who pay off the government, or both. And there are severe downsides to all those things. Like there's no answer. Whenever I look at this question, there's no 0 or 100 answer that makes everything right or everything wrong. And part of the job in society is when things do get out of control, including like, of course, that starting with the government, like we got to be vigilant and we got to use our First Amendment rights and protect them to be able to speak against that. But, you know, I do sit here and ponder sometimes when I'm out there walking along the skyline, or when I'm sitting in here looking at the picture of just this skyline right here of Manhattan with these millions of people in this one little speck within this country, and all the technology that I even know of exists around the world, to say nothing of all the technology that I don't know exists, and the 8 billion people with all different types of fucking motivations that exist around this world, that anything can happen and pop off at any moment. It's like I have such an appreciation for how fragile society is. And it kind of blows my mind.
Can I share something with you?
Please, yes.
Can you pull up on Google, type in the word pale blue dot?
Pale blue dot?
Pale blue dot. I'd like to walk you through something here.
Okay.
Pull up that picture there on images. That big one right there. Let's go to the right. Yeah, just hit
that one?
Yeah, just hit that. Now blow that up.
Are we allowed?
By the way, not literally. I mean, yeah. Okay. Now what? Now, Julian, what do you see there in that picture?
I see a pale blue dot in the middle of that little light strip.
That's right. You want to know what that is? So let me tell you. Everything you have ever learned, every moment in human history, every person that has ever lived, every person that has ever died, every person that's ever loved or hated, are all contained in that little blue dot. That is a picture taken by the Voyager spacecraft when it was leaving towards the outer parts of our solar system. We had to turn around and take a selfie, take a picture of our home planet.
That's Earth.
And that is Earth. That little 2 pixels, but what that is our planet floating through the vacuum of space, the inky blackness of nothingness, right? So if you want a demonstration of really how fragile we really are, you only have to look at that and realize our place in the universe, right? And yet, as infinitesimally obscure as that may be, we're also very special. We're also very unique. That's a very special place. Some people, when you look at that picture, it creates anxiety because people begin to realize how fragile we really are.
Yes.
Right? And very humbling. But other people look at that and they also find hope. They say, yeah, but that's what makes that so special.
Yeah.
You know, and so government's job is to hopefully represent the will of the people, right? And I think when we talk about how fragile we really are, you know, if you look at that picture, you realize there's really no such thing as ever being in the same place at the same time. You can come in here morning after morning and do your little routine, but the fact is that little blue dot is hurtling at an incredible speed around some obscure star that we call the sun. That's hurtling around some obscure part of a galaxy we call the Milky Way. That's part of a supercluster, and there's no going back. There is no such thing as being in the same place at the same time. It will never happen. And so all we have is future. All we have is going forward. And so that's another reason why I think it's in our best interest as humanity to work together, because we can learn from the past, but there's no going back. There's never going back.
Yeah.
And we have to realize that we're all in this together. When you look at that and you blow that up, you realize something interesting when you look at Earth from space. It's not like looking at a map. You don't have lines of delineation. You don't have borders. You begin to realize we're all kind of in this together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I would encourage people to kind of think of government that way too. That, you know, the job of government is to preserve our way of life and to create a path for us.
There's also the danger, though, of the people who are in a position within the government to have to know so much, then having the psychological bias of being not able to share that information and therefore thinking that they're making the right decisions on behalf of the people that they're supposed to answer
now
to.
That is, there you go. And I'll tell you what, man, I would be remiss if I didn't admit that myself. There are certain things that I work on that I do that I can't disclose. Because actively, yeah, because I feel that I am, I hate to use the word combat effective, but it's a military term. I'm more effective being able to, in some cases, operate some things in the shadows. Eventually they'll come out and the public will realize I was part of it, but it's too premature. And yes, I'm making that decision. And yes, in some cases, I'm making that decision unilaterally. My heart's in the right place, but you know what? I could be wrong. Yeah. And that's why it's important that our government, we work with the elements in our government so more people are aware and more people can decide, more people can put their brain power to it, right? And come up with a decision, come up with a way forward. And that's true in government transparency, I believe, on a lot of issues, not just the UAP topic or drone topic.
All of them.
You know, and you bring up a really good point. That's a very fair point. And I would be lying to you if I told you, even myself, if I said, well, I'm not subject to that. Yes, I am.
Sure you are.
Because we're human and we all have bias, right? We all have we have desires that we want to see fulfilled. In this particular case, I want greater transparency with the American government. And yet I'm the first one to admit that there are things that I'm not transparent on. And yes, you know what? That is a contradiction, but that is part of the human condition, right? It's anybody to deny that is full of crap. You know, we're all that way. And so how do we thread that needle?
In your work within the Pentagon and things that you were read in on or things you heard about secondhand from other teams or things that your team directly worked on, I don't want to just like put the name DARPA on this, but things that are like that or related programs, including obviously DARPA, which works on
Look, we got
technology.
really cool toys. We do. I can't talk about them, but we got some really cool advanced toys.
Now, I've heard from different people I've had through here, like, I don't want to say like consensus, but you know, sometimes the estimation seems to fall in the range of DARPA could have stuff that's 40, 50 years ahead of us, which I mean, when you extrapolate that across, I think it's Moore's Law, like that gets a little crazy, obviously. That said, if we could start with the statement that mathematically speaking, we could agree, looking at just even what we know of the size of the galaxy, the idea that we are alone as the only intelligent life is impossible, if not almost impossible.
And I would actually argue that maybe we're not intelligent at all. So
sure.
If you're looking for intelligent life, Earth may not be the place to look.
Just bear with me here, though. I say that because if we could just agree on that for a second and assume that we're not alone, and then say we're open to the possibility of whether or not we've been visited or visited by future humans or whatever, but we're not even going to necessarily say whether that's true or false right now. At the third layer of that, the thing that I think we can be very confident exists is high-level advanced weaponry, and I hope we, in the United States, I'm biased, have the best stuff. That said, could you not see why it would be very useful for people like you, people like any of the other people we've mentioned who maybe know that kind of stuff, to be able to use a topic like UAP that may very well be real and say, let's get the focus of the people on that because we don't want China and Russia and these other countries to know about, I'm just going to put random names on this, I don't know, anti-gravity type technology that we may have. Could you see why there's people who might think, oh, this might be it might be a distraction campaign rooted in some truth?
I can, but that would be the hardest way to do it. You don't need to. If you want to galvanize the American people, look at 9/11. We got attacked. What happened? We went to war, global war on terror, right? And so we literally went to war in Afghanistan and Iraq, in essence, because of the predicate of an event that happened in 9/11. You didn't have to lie to people about it. Same thing with this topic. If you want more money to compete against Russia or China, the best thing to do is tell the American people they're ahead of us. You don't need to create some cockamamie story that there's UAP.
That's not what I'm saying. Let me be more clear. I wasn't clear on that. Assume you don't need more money. Okay. Assume you just know you have X technology, whatever the fuck that is here. and you don't want that information being looked into. You don't want adversaries spying on this or trying to find a way to spy on a thread that could get them to that thing.
Right.
You use a public campaign to distract people from whatever that is to create, I don't know, like an end around.
See, I think it's the opposite. I think by doing that, you're going to create more curiosity, more foreign intelligence involvement. Look, it's no secret that Russia and China have their own program and had their own program. In fact, the China South Morning Sun, I believe it was a China South Morning Sun newspaper article, had something called the Five Continents Initiative, where they were actually proposing to the United Nations to run the world's UFO investigative body, right? So you don't need, if you want to keep something secret, what you don't do is call attention to it. And by talking about UAP and people speculating, well, maybe we've reverse engineered, maybe we learned, that's the last thing you want to do, because now you're putting people onto the trail. Now other governments will be like, oh, so America knows something about this and maybe they have the advantage, right? And then, of course, they're going to apply all their intelligence collection efforts to try to figure you out.
Okay, but what if it's not, sorry to cut you off, but I got to play this. What if it's not anti-gravity, and that's the whole point? We're trying to act like, oh no, don't look at that anti-gravity over there, when in reality maybe the thing we're working on is AI.
Okay.
And we have some crazy AI that they don't know we have. And now they're not guessing that we have that because they think, oh my God, they might have reverse engineered something.
No. Intel doesn't work that way. Intel's very specific, man. Intel is
spoken like a true Intel.
Look, if you've got an understanding that country X or country Y has got a certain capability, no matter what they say publicly, it's not going to change. I'll give you a case in point. Look, Russians have something called a supercavitational torpedo.
A what?
Supercavitation. Pull it. I'm only saying things that are in the public domain, so I'm not going to talk about spill secrets here.
What a name!
But type in
supercavitational security.
So there you go, supercavitating torpedo. You know, coming up with a cockamamie story to try to divert countries from collecting that technology. We already know it exists. So no matter what they say, we're going to continue focusing, right? When I say we, I don't mean U.S. I mean any type of intelligence organization in another country who wants that type of technology is going to continue collecting, no matter what type of story Putin or the Kremlin try to come up with, right? The cat's out of the bag. They know, we know this capability exists.
If the cat wasn't out, again, technology X, what if, let's even forget what it is. Technology X exists and the cat is not out of the bag.
Then you wouldn't even come up with a story because it's protected. Why would you come up with a diversion?
That's way over here.
That's way over here, but for something that hasn't been compromised yet. It's all you're doing. It's
proactively.
But even if you're over here, you're still creating a diversion where eventually second and third order effects, you might wind up getting back to this technology, this capability, saying, oh, this is just the Americans trying to do a shell game with us, right? These are all, as you know, analysts in the intelligence community are really, really good at looking at the second and third order consequences. If we do this, they'll do this. If we do that, they'll do that. And if we do over here, then they'll come over on this side. That's all part of it. If you don't want to, here's for example, you have an anniversary ring that you have for your significant other, but you don't want that person to know that you bought them an anniversary ring and you're going to propose, right? So what you're not going to do is start acting all spooky by saying, oh, in the living room, don't look over there because I have, you know, you're not going to mention it at all because she's like, oh, you're acting kind of strange. Or he might be like, well, that's weird. Why are you acting the way you're acting? What are you hiding, right? And now suspicion goes. And now they're going to be sensitized to trying to find what you're doing, what you're trying to hide, right? They're looking at it like, oh, that's nonsense. That person's acting weird for a reason, right? And now you are creating suspicion where there was no suspicion before. So to do that, I think would be counterproductive. I certainly, if I was ever leading an operation, I would never make the recommendation to come up with a cover story as a diversion preemptively. I would have waited till I know that, okay, they know something about something, so let's go ahead and do what we have to do right now to stop that. But there's a lot of risk in trying to create some sort of preemptive cover story. Could it be done? It can, but you'd have to have everything go exactly the way you want, every time you want, for that story to be sold. I mean, and that you'd have to have a lot of people, a lot of approval, all the way up the chain of command. We're just not that good.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. I think it's a complicated subject matter because there's context that you know, especially not even existing in that world, I can't even conceive of. That said, we have seen an unprecedented move, as we mentioned multiple times today, and it's talked about all the time in the media, where since 2017 we've seen people like you who have quote unquote walked out of the government and started to discuss this stuff. And recently we had in 2023, David Grusch came out and gave testimony of things that he was able to uncover through research that not necessarily he was standing in front of. You know,
in some cases he was.
But like he wasn't there in 1933.
Right, correct. Right, yeah, you talked to Magenta, yeah.
Yes, correct. So he then may have had access to certain things and seen certain things, but he has there's like this Grusch group of, 43 whistleblowers or whatever that supposedly are attached to him that are slowly coming out. And now we've had this guy, Jake Barber, come out. Jesse Michaels, friend of the show and your friend as well, did a great sit down with him where he went through this whole thing for, I think, like 3 hours running through his story, where it got interesting because here you had essentially like a pilot who worked within
special operations
pilot who worked within the Air Force and then worked for a contractor, right, for projects on behalf of the government, where he claims that he was a part of crash retrievals and recovering things that are not of this earth, which I will actually defend him and say the way that he said he came up with that, if I understood it correctly, is that it was his opinion when he looked at it was not of this earth. It wasn't like, someone came to him and said that's not of this earth.
That's his personal observation.
Right. So maybe devil's advocate for him, it could be some crazy advanced technology with this egg thing that, he doesn't know about.
Well, remember the words of Arthur C. Clarke, right? It said,
no, I don't.
Any advanced technology would appear like magic.
Yes. Okay. All right. Yes, I am familiar with that. So it could mean like you might look at advanced technology and not even be able to conceive it and think that that's extraterrestrial. That said, what do you think of this guy's testimony?
Well, I don't know. I never met him. I can tell you that some of the special operators who I do know personally have worked with him and have validated his story. I don't know. It's just like when people ask me about Bob Lazar. I've never met the gentleman. And so my opinion really doesn't count. I think he's telling his truth. I think he is, first of all, very brave to come out to have this conversation, knowing the crap that he's going to have to endure. And he's already had to endure. As a former military person and special operator, he automatically has my respect. Now, does that mean he's always right or always perfect? No. I mean, he's human, just like me and you and everybody else. But I do applaud him for his courage to come forward. I think he is doing what he feels is right. Again, I do not know him personally, but I think it's important that anybody who comes out as a whistleblower, we need to give them their day in court. We need to. They have a voice. They earned it. Unfortunately, there are some people that have come out previously where it turns out maybe they didn't have quite the access that they said they had, or something to that effect.
Do you have an example of that?
Again, I don't like to talk about people. I don't. There's this community has for many, many years talked about whistleblowers going back to the 1970s, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I can only speak from my perspective, and I'm certainly not going to throw anybody under the bus, especially if I wasn't there. So if I wasn't there to witness their story, most people say, "Oh, that's BS." But well, if you're not there to witness it, then how can you say it's BS? You can't. Just like you can't say it's real, right? Mm. So I prefer to address Jake for what he did do, and we do know his military background, and it's legitimate. And he was, he is who he says he is. So that all checks out. And the people that I know personally, who I would be willing to go to combat with, have vouched for him. But again, I wasn't there. So yeah. My involvement in this topic was completely different. Mine was more Pentagon, nuts and bolts, big picture programmatics, where his involvement allegedly was far more nuanced.
On the ground.
Actual recovery, right. And so but he's got the pedigree, he's got the military pedigree. And by the way, as a special operator, you're the best of the best. You're subject to routine psychological evaluations, polygraph examinations, drug testing, right? And you got to pass every one of them and all of them.
A thing that bothers me that I run into with literally every single one of these guys, I probably run into it with you, but again, like you said, you were more in the office part of this rather than some of these like actual on the ground things that happen. So specifically with the guys who are talking about shit on the ground, is when they come out and they whistleblow on something and they say something that at first thought just sounds fucking crazy. Like Barber coming out and saying, yeah, I picked up a fucking NHI vehicle with my helicopter and, you know, by the way, I did it for a contractor on behalf of the government. Here you go. That's fucking crazy. That would seem like the biggest secret ever, that someone coming out and saying that would never even get the chance to say because, you know, the deep forces of the government would kill him before, right? Like it sounds like that kind of thing. But then the same guy will then say, you know, he'll start talking about some firefight that happened that might have involved some of these, I don't know, retrievals or projects existing around it and be like, oh, I can't talk about that. Like, how do we... You're out here talking about retrieving a fucking alien craft and leaking an alleged video, which the video didn't do him
Well,
justice.
there's a difference between reporting on advanced technologies and reporting on war crimes. That's a different issue altogether. So if you're talking about a firefight, you know, between friendly forces, that's a whole different issue. Again, hypothetically, that's an example. Also, you know, let's not forget that claims that sounded ridiculous at the time in certain things turned out to be true. So case in point, you know, CIA, when they were experimenting with LSD and administering it to unsuspecting people.
A little MK Ultra action.
Maybe, right? Or perhaps the syphilis experiments where we had a cure for syphilis and yet we allowed people to go and progress the entire stages and die from it. Your government did. Look, there's a report that just came out last week from the CIA. You want to pull it up. It's unbelievable.
About the syphilis stuff?
No, worse, where the CIA actually was going to blow up a military boat in Havana Harbor as a predicate in order to go ahead and invade Cuba. This just came out, FOIA.
FOIA?
Yeah. So
they let this out?
So type in
is that it?
CIA military boat Cuba. There you go. And look at the report that come out.
Well, that's Operation Mongoose. No. We know that one.
Yeah, that's right. Who planned bomb plot in Cuba invasion? There you go.
Okay.
And the CIA admitted it, and they released the report, and they said it's okay if we go ahead and kill a bunch of Americans because we're going to piss off the American people. And we can blame Cuba.
They would never do that. Come on now.
It's in black and
I'm
white.
Fucking with you, Lou.
Oh, I didn't write that damn thing.
Alan Dulles, come on. He would never do such a thing.
So, you know, this is the problem. And if you go, you can see actually a news report on it, and you can see they did a big, but, you know, this is, go to news. Type in CIA report. Put CIA report and then put in U.S. military. Cuba. Yeah, there you go. Center Cuba legacy, dedicated diplomacy, tourism, organization. Pentagon DX show, deep state. There you go. Fears, release of JFK files. Hit that one, Daily Mail. Yep.
Chilling Pentagon document reveals war-provoking reason deep state has always feared release of JFK assassination files. Chilling Pentagon documents may reveal why the deep state has always feared the release of the files. A 12-page report signed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 1962 details a secret plan to commit heinous acts against American citizens to justify war with Cuba in the 1960s. Codename, were you talking about Operation Northwoods? Yeah. So this just got declassified?
Yeah.
This is old news. Yeah.
Well, the problem is now they're releasing it, right?
Yeah,
like,
now they're releasing
it.
But yeah, we read this. We've read some of this stuff on podcasts before. But yeah, exactly. Like they were doing all kinds of shit.
Yeah. So people say, "Oh, that's shocking. That would never happen."
No. Who the fuck says that? Yeah, I mean, look, there's a real. We are at the crux, and this issue is just one of the many on the spinning wheel of issues related to it. If you're talking about UFOs, that's just one little nugget here. But we are in this moment where the institution exposure at every level, I'm talking in private society, government, everything, has gotten so bad with the internet and access to old files and people being able to talk about it on social media that and things have gone so wrong in the last 20 years too, that the trust level is at a zero with many people.
Yeah, the faith and confidence is at an all-time low with our government. And I do think this new administration recognizes that and is trying to repair some of that by following through on what they said they were going to do. I do see them making a proactive effort to try to do that, trying to restore some of the faith and confidence.
Well, let's bring it full circle back to Tulsi, where we talked about at the very beginning of this conversation. Through no fault of her own, she's been someone who's already, long before she was ever nominated for this position, has been attacked by, say, forces within the existing government and bureaucratic structure. Mm-hmm. So not to say that she doesn't,
By the way, I know how that feels.
yeah, but I'm saying not to say she doesn't come in with the best intentions. She may very well be coming in with the best intentions. But isn't it cynically also looking at it and knowing how the government works, as a citizen who sees this from the outside, wouldn't it be fair for me to say they're going to treat her like a mushroom, feed her shit, keep her in the dark? Because the same people that tried to like destroy her are now supposed to report to her, and they're the ones, their whole job is to be covert and intel, where she's not on the ground with them. She doesn't know what they're doing. A
lot of those people are being removed. I don't know if you've been keeping up with the news lately, but this administration is canning the hell out of a lot of people that were trying to sequester the truth in all sorts of different topics, mm-hmm. right? If you know a little bit about, again, if you were to I think actually meet Tulsi, the one thing that you realize is that she's fearless. She does not care about breaking China. There's a couple people that I've always kind of felt, sometimes you need a bull in the China shop, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes, you need you need a proverbial hand grenade in the punch bowl, right? To fix things. And also it helps that if you have an understanding of how government works, so then you can fix those problems, right? You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're not trying to rebuild the intelligence community. We're just trying to make it work better the way it was designed to, and unfortunately the challenge is when you are in government, you have a responsibility. You inherit this car, and all of a sudden, this car that you paid $1,000 for, you realize it's got a blown radiator, the water pump's shot. Maybe you're missing cylinder number 7 for whatever reason. It's not firing, and you got these problems. Most of the time, you have the ability to take it to the shop and fix it. The problem is we can't do that. We have to figure out a way to fix the car while we're driving it at 80 miles an hour down the highway. Mm. And so to do that, you don't want to just start mucking around the engine and tearing crap out. That's going to make it even worse, right? What you want to do is fix the problem. And so in order to fix a problem and have a solution, you first need to understand how it works. How does the engine work? How does it relate to the transmission? How does it relate to the cooling system? How does it relate to all these things, right? So as you're trying to fix the car while you're driving down the road, you don't break something inadvertently that makes it even worse. And so, people say, well, with that government background, is it kind of a fox in the hen house situation? Well, yeah, that's the risk you take. That's why you have to look at the person's track record. That's why you have to look at a person's capabilities and their strengths and their weaknesses and their skill sets. And in this case, you have somebody who understands intel, understands military, understands government, understands politics and the legislative branch, pretty much checks all the blocks that if you were having somebody for a job interview, you'd be like, hey, you know what? You kind of check all the blocks. And then, you have personality, the ability to communicate with other people in a fair and open way. And look, I'm going to get a bunch of crap for this. Because people, just the mere fact that she was a Democrat and now Republican, they're going to be all over me for this. So my endorsement of her isn't a political endorsement. It is an operational and experience endorsement. She has what is necessary to do the job. Now, you may not like her. Okay, fine. You're entitled to that. And you may not like the fact that she said this or said it that way or whatever. That's fine. But you can't deny the fact that she was very effective as a leader and has accomplished and achieved more despite the challenges, right? So I want someone like that in my government to help make the necessary changes. Someone who's not going to be overly gun shy, who understands how the government works and how to fix the car without breaking it anymore.
Do you think that?
And by the way, there's a lot of people right now in government that I feel that way about. It's not just
Tulsi.
Tulsi, yeah. I mean, obviously, we're talking about Tulsi Gabbard because you brought it up, but there's other individuals as well that I'm extremely hopeful for.
Is there anyone you'd care to name with that?
No, only because you brought it up. I mentioned it, but I want to respect the privacy of anybody who's coming into this administration. I do not want to affect their ability to do their job one way or the other. But, there's quite a few folks that are really going to try their best to make a change, and I see it. And I know it from personal experience, seeing their track record, looking at their engagement on the Hill. You know, they're no nonsense people.
Have you talked with anyone in the incoming administration at length about things like remote viewing?
You know, again, I'm not going to talk about what I may or may not have said to anybody in the incoming administration. That would be for them to answer. I want to give them the full ability. I want to respect their authority, and I'm not a kiss and tell kind of guy. I'm not going to go there. Again, all due respect, I know it's a great question, but it's like, you know, if you and I having this interview right now, and then someone when I get home saying, "Hey, what'd you guys talk about in the car?" You know what? It's none of your business.
Yeah.
You know, you want to know? Ask Julian. You know, I know you're curious, and don't take offense to it, but it's a part of a conversation that occurred between two people, and you know that other person has a vote. Maybe they don't want people to know, right? Yeah. That we had a conversation because they had a conversation with Lou, the UFO guy, right? So I'll do a polite pass on that question.
Okay. Well, you and I talked about that at the very end last time, and you had to get out of here, so we didn't get to spend a lot of time on it. But there's a lot of scrutiny on this stuff because people from the outside, they hear about something like remote viewing, which, you know, is essentially being able to see other things around the world or see into the future in some ways, and they're like, how the fuck could that exist? And yet we had something like Project Stargate where, you know,
and Grill Flame before that, and
what before that?
Grill Flame.
What was that?
It was the natural. So Stargate was really one of the last code names that was used. There were several names before that.
And these are guys like Joe McMonagle was involved with that, and they, you know, claimed to be able to see things. And you wrote about it in your book how like you remote viewed. And the thing that was, I was looking at the page and kind of going on that a little bit was, you know, you made it sound like, oh yeah, anyone could do this. And when I talked with you about it, I think we talked about that offline a little bit at one point. You didn't describe it that way. You know, like meaning the way it sounded when I was reading the words in the book is that it sounded, you were like, yeah, fucking anyone could do this.
I do believe that. I think most people can do it. Absolutely.
So I totally misunderstood you off air.
It must have been, because I think most people can do it. I think it's actually I don't think it's anything new. In fact, I think it's probably related to some sort of vestigial capability we had as ancient humans. Because
you think most people could see halfway around the world right now? And
I think if you understand, I don't think it's woo. I think it's all based in quantum mechanics. Quantum physics.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, sure. So let's let me give you an example. You ever smoke cigars?
Of course.
Okay, so let me give you an example. We now realize we live in a three-dimensional space, right? You can think of the way our space is as three axes: x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis, meaning up, down, left, right, forward, and backward. And you can navigate in a three-dimensional space that way. Mm-hmm. Time is experienced a little bit differently. Even though it's considered a dimension, we experience time as linear, as in always going forward, right? But and the classic models of physics, for example, when I was in school, we learned about the electron orbiting around the nucleus of an atom. Turns out that's not really accurate. Turns out that there's this weird duality principle that the electron they call it an electron cloud, because you can never actually predict the exact location of an electron. In fact, some scientists now predict that an electron is so small that it's actually zipping in and out of the existence of our universe trillions of times per second. And so therefore it is there and not all at the same time. So take that principle. Now let's look at time itself. We know for a fact time is inextricably tied to space, right? You can't have one without the other, in essence. Space and time, that's what we call it, space-time. And we know that space-time is flexible. That's a fact. In fact, if you look at a ground station here, a GPS ground station with an atomic cesium clock, and compare it to the atomic cesium clock, exactly the same exact atomic decay half-life as the clock on the spacecraft, you're going to realize there's something called atomic drift. Time is experienced differently. Yeah. The watch actually runs differently the further you are away from a massive object, in this case, Earth. Okay, so mass and energy can affect space-time. And again, it's not just space, it's space and time. So let's look at that for a minute. Let's look at a cigar. Imagine if I were to ask you, Julian, give me your simplest one sentence or less, few words possible, What's your definition of the past?
Of the past?
Of the past. What's your definition of the past? No
things
rhetoric.
that already happened.
Great. Things that have occurred, right? What is then by that same type of thinking, what would your definition of the future be?
Things that haven't yet occurred.
Haven't happened yet, right? So what is the present? Well, the present is actually very elusive. The present actually isn't a moment in time. It's actually a transition process where the future becomes the past. And we live in that moment. And probably it's an infinitesimally smallest moment of space-time that's probably measured in playing time, right? And so let's go back to our cigar analogy. Imagine the ashes of the cigar as being the past. You can't put it back together. It's burnt. Imagine that part of the cigar that hasn't burnt yet, the tobacco leaf, as the future. Mm-hmm. And the present is that moment of ignition. It's the cherry. It's the fire where the future, the tobacco leaf is being consumed and turned into ash. And so if you were to look at that cigar that's burning or a cigarette, and you had the ability to kind of remove some of the glare and focus really in on that moment of ignition, that cherry, that transition process between tobacco leaf and ash, you would notice that the cigar burns unevenly. It doesn't burn evenly. I mean, there's moments at the very, very finest point, smallest point, where it becomes hard to distinguish between the future and the past. Yeah. And because it burns unevenly. And so using that analogy, some have speculated that remote viewing is really where some people experience the present, where that cherry is maybe a little bit bigger, where more of the future and more of the past is being experienced as now. And that this is probably related to quantum mechanics and quantum entanglement, more so than it is, the woo-woo stuff that people ascribe it to. And in fact, if you talk to some neuroscientists, some actually believe that human consciousness is a quantum process. And you can look it up online. Again, it's not according to Lou.
You're taking the words out of my mouth. Keep going.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then no wonder some people can experience the present with more elements of the future and the past as if it's happening now. And even more so, importantly, that this may be something that a lot of living things have. Have you ever seen when two dogs walk into a room, there's this nonverbal communication? Yes. That is occurring. Why? Because they haven't developed the language. Now, we are lazy. As human beings, we've developed language to the point now where you and I can communicate. But the reality is there was a time where we couldn't. Depending on what village I came from or what cave I came from, I would never be able to communicate with you because I don't have the same language. We didn't develop the same, right? And so is there another form of communication that's more innate, that's more primitive, that we relied on for our survival way back when, before we had verbal communication and these little things called cell phones and global devices that allowed us to communicate with one another? Was there another way to do it? And some people have speculated, well, the closer you get to your spouse, it's weird because all of a sudden now I've been with that person for 7 years and, I'm overseas. I give them a call and they're like, oh my God, I was just thinking of you. I was just going to call you, right? Maybe that's really more in line with where remote viewing comes from. It's where space and time is not necessarily experienced linearly, but maybe a little bit more like the electron cloud versus an electron orbit around the nucleus.
If we're also capable of it, though, why doesn't it happen way more?
Maybe it does. I mean, how often do people say, oh, that's such a coincidence? Well, was it? I mean,
so someone around the world was like making that happen?
Well, not so deliberately. Look, here's another case in point. My background's medical program was microbiology, immunology, and college.
Mm-hmm. And patents.
And patents. Look, when you're in the hospital and you get into a severe accident, what is the one way we know if you are truly alive or not? And it's not
the heart monitor.
Well, it's more than that, actually, because you can be kept artificially alive, right? It's brain activity. Mm. And how do we detect brain activity? Where there are biochemical reactions that occur and bioelectrical, more importantly, reactions that occur in the brain. And we can put sensors and we can detect brainwave activity to determine if someone is brain dead or not, right? That's the decision to pull the plug. So we know we can pick up these invisible signals, just like radio transmissions from the human brain. We do it all the time at every hospital out there, just about. Is it possible that we know the brains give off communication signals? That's a fact. Is it possible that some people can actually also interpret that, or like an antenna? So not only transmit a signal, but also receive a signal like a radio. right? And if that's the case, then would that explain some of these things where people say, oh, well, what a coincidence? Well, maybe it wasn't. Maybe you guys are just synchronized now.
Or like deja vu type things.
Right. Possibly as well, right? So there's a whole area of exploration here that I think scientists are now beginning to look at and realize that was once considered woo is probably just biological. And it's probably not as uncommon as we think it is. And it might be even shared with other species too.
For people who did not hear episode 237 with you, can you just briefly explain? Well, that was the last time you were in here. I think that was like 3 hours and 21 minutes.
The fact that you know that is incredible. Episode 237.
Yeah, so I think it was like the last 8 or 9 minutes of that episode we discussed this. But you laid this out in your book, Imminent. You had your remote viewing experience involved you. I guess I don't know how you describe it, but like peering into where there were terrorist prisoners, and then they describe like a ghost dancing above them or something. Can you just explain this again? I want to make sure I get the details.
Yeah, right. I mean, I want to be really careful because I'm going to get a lot of crap for this.
Yeah, I know.
A lot. Okay.
Well, we've already been talking for 2.5 hours. There's already a lot of crap in the comments. You're okay.
Oh, lovely. I'm sorry you have to endure that.
I don't care.
You guys are actually watching the comments live? Oh, my God. I'm so sorry.
You just can't look at them, Lou.
Yeah, I know.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, so for me, it was like, let me see if I can describe it, like a vivid memory. That's probably the best way I can describe it. There's aspects that become fuzzy, but you try to dial in on, and then there's aspects that come in with a lot of clarity.
Where are you when this is happening?
Right here, physically. Right?
No, but like where were you the day you remote viewed? Like,
well,
take me there.
Oh, for that particular moment?
Yeah.
We were in a skiff at the Pentagon.
Okay.
And we were, I got cleared, so I guess I can talk about it. Some colleagues of mine took a lunch, did a brown bag lunch. I had been to Gitmo before, to the prisons and various camps there. And we decided to do an experiment and see if we could remote view a particular detainee. And so we conducted this experiment. And shortly thereafter, one of my colleagues came in with a newspaper article in the Miami Herald where there was a complaint through the person's defense team that he felt like he was being tormented, and that there was as they described it as a secret CIA program that had been established to torment one of these individuals. First of all, I'll tell you, it was not a CIA program. It was
lunch bag in the skiff.
It was lunch bag in the skiff. And because of what this newspaper article came out with, we stopped immediately. We did not need to create any type of issues regarding these particular detainees or their defense teams. There's some potentially moral issues.
How did they even come up with that, Lou? Like, how did they come up with that? Trace that back to like
you know
guys
what?
did.
I don't know. And if you want to look, there's a newspaper article if you really want to see it.
Yeah.
So type
Miami Herald.
Miami Herald. Type. You know what? I don't want to say this on air. So can I type something there for you real quick?
Sure.
See what pops up.
Lou's gonna pop around to the big board, take over for Alessi for a minute.
I just don't want to.
We're gonna give you a producer credit on this. Don't worry. I got you. Never a dull moment in the studio with Lou Elizondo.
Right there. Okay. Go for it.
Yeah, that board, not that one. That's right.
Is there a way where you can just see the results, not what I'm actually typing?
Yes, on that screen that you're on right there. So don't drag it onto the other screen. And I just while Lou's doing this, I know we had to blue balls you earlier with what he showed me on the phone, but it's not what you think. It was just very out of left field. Certainly not a. You saw the John Kiriakou thing, right, Alessi? I showed you that picture when he showed me on camera, and we couldn't show it on camera of Abu Zubaydah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, nothing, not even remotely close to that. But fascinating stuff. I'll put it that way. Okay, so tell us what we can read there, because
yeah, he doesn't have a title in it, so
he doesn't what?
It doesn't have the search engine where it is. It's just the article.
Okay, cool. So I can read this?
Yeah, but look, let me preface this.
Okay.
You know, I don't know if you know, I certainly want to say I'm responsible for that but
you have no responsibility. Okay.
well,
Defense lawyer to Guantanamo judge. Secret program may be depriving 9/11 defendant of sleep.
Okay, now first of all, people already accuse me of heinous, horrible things at Guantanamo Bay. So,
right.
You know, this is obviously not helping me. People are going to think that, but you asked a direct question. I'm trying to be as transparent as possible. Yeah. So, but I know I'm going to get a lot of.
Well, you mention it in your. I mean, to your credit, you mention it in your book, like what the nickname was and all that. So, like, there's a part of you that's like, people are going to say what they're going to say. I guess on that one, you kind of accept that in that way. Not necessarily agree with the title, but accept that people are going to say what they're going to say.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, that's what people...
Okay. All right, so an attorney for the accused 9/11 plotter who has complained about strange overnight noises and vibrations in his prison cell for years told a military judge Sunday that the problem was back and then it may be caused by a covert Pentagon program disclosed to the court just last week. Oh, so it was disclosed to the court. Yeah. Death penalty defender Jim Harrington raised the issue in a rare Sunday session of pretrial hearings in the September 11 terror trial, seeking to delay a conflict question in favor of a forensic examination of what's going on in Camp 7, Guantanamo's most clandestine lockup where former CIA captives are held. Army Colonel James L. Pohl, the 9/11 trial judge, refused the request, but not before he asked whether the noises and vibrations said to be experienced by alleged terrorist Ramzi bin al-Shibh were known to his Army guards. Not necessarily, Harrington replied. It's a very, very sophisticated so he admits it's a very, very sophisticated program. The exchange was the latest in the court effort to talk about the things at the secret prison in public without going into details. The program was so clandestine, the prosecutors knew about it, but the judge didn't until last week.
And that's not true. The prosecutors did not know. That's not correct. This was an attempt by, I think, the defense team this was a legal maneuver to try to, cast shade on the prosecution team.
Okay, yeah. So it goes on. People can, based on what I read, they can Google just the words I said, and they'll probably find it. So that's fine. But that's, God, I'm so confused because, to even know about that means that someone had to tip him off.
Yeah, there's other. Yeah, I can't talk about it. Obviously, we were very concerned and very disappointed by that. It was not an officially sanctioned thing. It wasn't that, I want to be very clear here. This was an experiment.
It's so hard for me to conceive of that.
Yeah.
And your explanation of quantum mechanics, just because, maybe there's this involuntary thing that happens where people are doing it, and I'm doing it sometimes and don't even know I'm doing it, and I affect something halfway around the world. In this case, though, you're sitting in the skiff going, let's do it, right? There's
not exactly like that, but
there's a plan. Were your feet crossed? How are we doing it? Pretzel style?
It's part of my life. I don't look. It's already weird enough. I try to be as no nonsense as possible.
Yeah.
It doesn't help when look. We live in an awfully big universe, very complex.
Yeah.
And things that seem kind of weird and woo, could just be that it's our lack of understanding, right? It's like imagine being in 1860 and explaining to somebody Wi-Fi, invisible signals through the air, that you have a magic box and now all of a sudden you can play music anytime you want, right? That sounds crazy.
Yep.
But it's not a science. So yeah, that's about all I can say about that. I realize it's a weird conversation.
Yeah.
I'm not ignorant to that fact. And at the end of the day, I can't tell you how it works. I don't know how it works. But I know that the government put a lot of money into doing research on it.
If they closed, air quotes there, Project Stargate, though, is it reasonable to assume hypothetically that kind of project still exists, just under some different name, and we don't know about it and it's covert? And assuming you didn't know about it.
Well, I can't assume so because of my security clearance. So I'm just what I'm going to do is simply say I would not be able to comment if there was a government program existing to do certain things. I don't have permission to discuss that.
Okay.
If it did or didn't, I confirm or deny. I cannot.
But it is fair to say it's definitely not a perfect science.
Oh, of course not. No, It's subjective. It should never be considered unilateral. If you get something, you could be dead wrong. So it should just be just like all intelligence, right? So you have human intelligence. What happens when you place more emphasis on one form of intelligence over another? Well, you get bias, right? So that's why, like Operation Curveball with our human source that we had in Iraq, you never rely on a single source of intelligence ever, whether it's human, imment, SIGINT, doesn't matter, right? Or certainly remote viewing. It's subjective. So, I would tell anybody, it's like, oh, is it like looking through a crystal ball? Not at all. No. And I definitely would never, ever promote the idea of relying on it as a single source, ever. Should be there to maybe help support. Now, there's examples where, for example, remote viewers for the U.S. government found a supersonic experimental jet that the Russians were testing over Africa, and I believe it crashed in Congo. And it was, despite our best, airborne capabilities and maybe other capabilities, we couldn't find it. And neither could the Russians. It was remote viewers that found the aircraft, right? So,
no, I believe there's something there. I like some of the things I've heard, like there's something there.
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
Things
Now,
that are
what it is, I
unexplainable.
don't know if anybody knows that answer. I certainly don't. I can't say, no, oh, it works this way and that way. And there's other people that tell you, hey, methods vary.
Yeah.
What works for me may not work for you, and what works for you may not work for me. There's a time where they used to do ideograms, and that didn't do crap for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it was not helpful at all. Never worked for me.
There's something, I'm more open-minded on not necessarily like remote viewing itself, but like this whole subcategory of what the capabilities of our consciousness is because
Well, you remember the oracles of Delphi, right? I mean,
wait, yes, I do know that name. What is that name?
Yeah, these were the ancient soothsayers, and beware the Ides of March, right?
Yes, yeah.
This is nothing new. Remote viewing has been in practice for a long time by countries and governments and militaries spanning thousands of years.
Yeah.
You can call it what you want, but remote viewing today, or a soothsaying yesterday, or the oracles of Delphi, or Nostradamus, or whatever you want to put in there term, but it's all maybe describing the same thing.
Sure. Have you seen this podcast that went viral from the fall called the Telepathy tapes?
I have not seen it, and I haven't on purpose.
Or heard it, I should say.
I heard of it, but I have not at all listened to it, and I did on purpose because I don't want to. I want to be careful. I don't prejudice the jury, so to speak. Meaning, I don't want to have someone else's analytic overlay subconsciously be incorporated by me.
Okay.
So,
have you talked with people about this though?
About the telepathy tapes?
Yeah,
I have
like
not.
okay.
No.
So it has warped my mind a little bit just because of the way that this woman Kai Dickens was able to gather some of this data. Essentially, and I'm really dumbing this down here, like it's an amazing series. I highly recommend everyone go listen to the full thing. But she had heard about all these reports from people around the world who were reporting how their autistic nonverbal kids or brother or whatever could communicate telepathically. And you hear that and you're like, oh yeah, okay. And then you hear some of the experiments she did with, a doctor on site, a scientist on site, these double-blind, I'm getting some of the terminology wrong, but these things she did where these kids seem like they can do that. And it makes you wonder if...
Oh, brother! I mean, the Russians had the Psychotronic weapons development program. I mean,
what's that?
That is using creating technology to amplify brain capability to affect change, matter in physical change in things. So,
how effective was it?
Type it up. You tell me.
Okay, what's it called again?
Russian Psychotronic weapons development program. Look it up on your little thing there.
God, what a cool name. Russian Psychotronic Weapons Development Program. Oh, that's a Bond movie. All right. Zombie Ray Gun Program. Does that ring a bell?
I mean, go right there. It's KGB and Soviet. Go down to about 3. See CIA? There you go. That's from the CIA, not Lou Elizondo. So you can read it for yourself.
You got to zoom in a little bit or less. That's really small. All right. Go up. All right. Psychotronic weapon dupes, KGB and Soviet military highlights of foreign ground combat developments. In a 21 April 1993 Literaturnaya Gazeta interview, Yevgeny Alexandrov of the Villanova Optical Institute revealed that experiments conducted in the former Soviet Union on mind-altering weapons were largely a hoax intended to milk millions of rubles from the KGB and the military. Alexandrov, in commenting on the validity of psychotronic weapons research, stated, "The whole thing was a grandiose snow job, a monstrous squandering of the national wealth. This work, fortunately for humanity, did not have any real content. It was an imitation of work science like shamanism. The military and KGB were simply taken for a ride."
So this is important because this shows definitively that not only were the Russians investing in this, but it's enough interest in the CIA that we actually reported on it, right?
But they got duped.
Well, okay, so this is a report that's saying they got duped. You'll see other reports where they say they didn't get duped. The Russians say, no, it actually worked quite well. We had our own psychotronic weapons development program because of it. So yes, that's right. So because the Russians were doing it, we did it too. So it's important to note that, like, for example, go to, yeah, there you go. Weird Russian Wired, Weird Russian Mind Control Research Behind It. To go down a little bit. Yeah, one more. There, hit that.
The weird Russian mind control research behind a DHS contract, a dungeon-like room in the Psychotechnology Research Institute in Moscow is used for human testing. The institute claims its technology can read the subconscious mind and alter behavior. A dungeon-like room in... All right, so Elena Rusakina, the silver-haired woman who runs the institute, gestured to the center of the claustrophobic room where what looked like a dentist chair sits in front of a glowing computer monitor. "We've had volunteers, a lot of them," she said. The thick concrete was muffling the noise from the college campus outside. "We worked out a program, a psychiatric facility to study criminals. There's no way to falsify the results. There's no subjectivism." Right. The Department of Homeland Security has gone to many strange places in search for ways to identify terrorists before they attack, but perhaps none stranger than this lab on the outskirts of Russia's capital. The institute has for years served as the center of an obscure field of human behavior study dubbed psychoecology that traces its roots back to Soviet-era mind control research.
So my point is that people took this enough seriously, not just in Russia, but the U.S.
Yeah.
Okay, so don't, when people say, "Oh, Lou, this is nonsense," don't blame me. We spent taxpayer money on it. You know, that wasn't my decision to do that. You know, people like to kind of paint me with a broad brush and say, well, you know, it's a bunch of hooey. That wasn't my decision to do that. I had not, you know, those decisions were made by very, very senior people that thought it was worth investing in, right? So, you know, maybe the execution could have been better. I don't know, but the bottom line is that there is enough there to say, hey, maybe we should look into this a little bit, right? Maybe there's something there. But again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you how. I don't know, you know. But if someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, Julian, you know, I had this weird feeling that you were a BMXer as a kid. You liked bikes and wanted to do BMX riding and maybe do some racing. And I have this clear image of you, you know, doing X, Y, and Z. And, you know, if that's information that only you know and you've never told me or anybody else about that, right? Then you got to say, oh, that's interesting. How would you know that? And what did you see? Is there any accuracy there, right? So, you know, I think, I guess the bottom line for me is that I always try to keep an open mind to everything. And there's a whole lot of mystery behind the human being, right? And if you look at us, whether genetically or anything else, we are very unique. And I personally believe, you know, when we get into the discussion of what people consider paranormal, I think everything in science is technically paranormal until it becomes normal. Meaning my cell phone here, all the things that we take for granted, right? The technology we use today, at some point in time, we're considered very paranormal. Yeah. And I think it's really our lack of understanding and our bias to try to things that we don't understand, we kind of pigeonhole them as being weird or odd. When really it's our naivety, really, you know, because it's not, and this goes into the bigger psychological issue of human beings. We like everything in a nice, neat little box. We like to know where we are. And that's why when people look at the pale blue dot picture, they get freaked out. Yep. You know, that's why if you look at the way cities, you know, the new cities are all north, south, east, west grid lines. And I lived in the southwest part of town on Street 32. I would drive down the highway, speed limit 65, you know, no passing lane. We like rules. We like boundaries to know where we are. And society does that innately. We build these barriers on purpose so we can feel comfortable and we know kind of where we are in the world, right? When you remove that, human beings get very insecure. And if there's something happening that we don't understand, whether it's a comet in the sky and we want to say it's the Lord of the underworld that's coming in to show us who they are, or an earthquake, right? The gods must be angry. No, it's actually just based in science. What's paranormal is our lack of understanding of the science. And I think that's the same true with human psychology. I think it's true with topics like remote viewing. Yeah. Our understanding hasn't caught up with yet the reality of what something is. And so it creates this internal angst as a species and as individuals.
I'm open to that for sure. Lou, real quick, I got to run to the bathroom, but I think
I do too. So I'll wait till you're done.
Yeah, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do a Patreon episode right after this.
Sure.
I think we'll cut that there. But your book imminent, as always. We'll have the link. We'll have the link down below. People can go get it there. It's a very good book, and I appreciate you doing round 2 with me.
Absolutely, my honor and privilege, man. And listen, you guys are doing a great job. And even a bigger thanks to your audience. Yes, and even the ones that hate me. That's fine, because we're having a conversation here that's collectively about all of us and involves all of us. And so I think you're doing a great service, you and your production team.
Me and Alessi.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say you have the shoes.
That's the team.
Too. I know. And you guys are killing it, doing a great job.
It's an underdog operation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But thank you for
I'd
coming.
say a big dog operation.
I appreciate you, Lou. I appreciate you coming through and getting this done again. I know you got snowed in last time. So
yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's all good.
I promised you I'd come back out.
You came right out. I really appreciate that. But we'll have the Patreon episode as well, so people can get that link down below. Everybody else, you know what it is. Give it a thought. Get back to me. Peace.
And the only reason why I can even tell you this right now is because I have approval from the Pentagon to say exactly what I'm saying right now.
Right.
But I was also reminded I signed documentation that I am not allowed to discuss anything.
The specifics. Yeah.
The specifics, right. Like it's in writing and it's now stored in a skiff, in a safe. So it's a legal contract. I don't want to violate that.
I just want to make sure, they weren't pulling the wool over you without providing you any type of way for you to have a safe signal.
There is documentation. You want to see something, take a look at...
Thank you guys for watching the episode. Before you leave, please be sure to hit that subscribe button and smash that like button on the video. It's a huge help. And also, if you're over on Instagram, be sure to follow the show at Julian Dorey Podcast, or also on my personal page at Julian D. Dorey. Both links are in the description below. Finally, if you'd like to catch up on our latest episodes, use the Julian Dorey Podcast playlist link in the description below. Thank you.